What's going on, sports fans, degenerates, my fellow gamblers? It's Monday, baby. It's a UFC Monday. We're back. We are at it. I'm coming off of a big winning week. Not last week, obviously, because there was no MMA last week, but the week before that. So we're feeling good. The confidence is up. Obviously, not in my usual setup, so I apologize if the audio isn't quite as clean as we usually like it to be. There's a little bit of an echo in here, and you may hear my daughter screaming in the background at some point in the middle of the show. But I hope everybody is doing well. Happy Memorial Day weekend to anybody here stateside that is celebrating. Of course, as always, thank you very much to the troops for your support. Anybody that paid that price for us, we appreciate you. But we are here to talk about MMA. We're talking gambling. We're talking betting. And I see we've already got 50 people in the chat. Mushroom, what is up? We got the Grateful Dude, Mike Harvey, Uncle Weezy in the chat. Gerald Lynch. We've got Niels Land, my guy, Boston Nick, MMA, shouting out the opportunity to support Pub Sports Radio here. You can buy us a coffee. You know, we just did Pubapalooza not that long ago, and we've got more stuff like that coming down the pipeline, big events where we're all going to go hang out and stuff. Any tips, donations, stuff like that here in the live chat, it will go to those types of items. So if you want to do more live shows with us, if you want us to get more involved with things, good way to give back if you guys enjoy the content. But as always, like my guy Nick says, smash that like button for us. How's Bufo on the beat doing? All right, guys, we have a long card in front of us this evening, a good one to get to, plenty to talk about. And not only that, I got a brand new guest for you guys. Extremely excited, a man that I've been a huge fan of myself for a very long time, making his overdue Die Hard MMA podcast debut. None other than Mayo Media Network's Brett Apley. Brett, what's going on, buddy? How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Clint. I appreciate you having me on. 1 week off. I'm trying to remember how to speak. I'm trying to remember what this MMA thing is. We got like 12 weeks in a row or something crazy like that coming out for MMA action. So really excited to be here. I've done a lot of shows with a lot of great people across the industry. And like I said to you off air, it's great to finally check this one off the list. Love what you do, and very excited to talk fights with you today.
Absolutely, man. Right back at you. And I'm pumped. This is going to be a fun card. It's, coming back off of a week, they could have given us a much worse card, and I would have sunk my teeth straight on into it. This one's not bad, man. I can't really complain. The matchups are good this week.
Yeah, and congratulations, by the way, coming off a huge week yourself. I know you kind of mentioned it in the intro, but nothing to sneeze at. Congratulations to you. And yeah, there haven't been a lot of fantastic cards, I think, in the last couple of months. Like, I find myself saying, oh, this isn't a great card. This isn't a great card. This is a good card. There's 14 fights. There isn't a ton of name value, and there's not as much data as I would like. We're looking at a bunch of fighters making their UFC debuts, a lot of fighters with 1 or 2 fights on the record, or in the UFC. But I think it's going to be fun. I think it's a long card. I think it's pretty high quality, and it's interesting because we have that lack of data, but we all have the same tools, to try to figure out who these fighters are coming off the regional scene. It's interesting. I'm looking forward to getting through these fights.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It's a good one. It really is. And like you said, a lot of debuting fighters and stuff, which can definitely be tricky when it comes to the betting breakdowns, but we'll throw those darts as best we can for you, everybody. Real quick, Mushroom asking if I'll be doing any more Q&A shows again. Mushroom, generally speaking, that's kind of an off-week thing. Anytime there's no UFC event, that's kind of what I like to do, is kind of hang out, chill, and chat. So like Brett said, we've got about a 12-week run of straight events to talk about. So probably not a Q&A show anytime soon. If that's something that you guys really like or enjoy, As you all know, I'm on that grind. I definitely want to do content creation as my day job. We're not quite there yet. If that's a thing you guys would like me to add, I can maybe look into doing something like that down the road. So after the show's over, hit me in the comment section below. Hit me up on Twitter. Let me know if you guys want more Q&A type shows. Definitely something that we can look at down the road. What's up, Toby? What's up, Goat? We've got Rick the Ruler in the house. Everybody flowing in here. Aiden Joe, how's it going? All right. So as you all know, this show has been sponsored by Pub Sports Radio and Superbook Sports. Got to shout these folks out over here. Superbook Sports is absolutely my favorite new book they opened up in Arizona. Their lines are extremely competitive. That's kind of my favorite thing about them is they keep it nice and tight. You're not going to see those 50-cent gaps in pricing and stuff like that. They really keep it nice and fair, usually a 20-cent line. So make sure you check out Superbook Sports if you haven't already. So what we've got, Brett, is kicking off UFC Vegas 56. I don't expect it to be the first fight of the night, if we're being completely honest. But right now, listed as the first fight of the evening is Erin Blanchfield taking on J.J. Aldrich. I think this one is going to move up the card. I heard, Brady and Uncle Weezy talking about that on their show just the other night, and I completely agree. This is such a fun fight. Well-known names, hyped-up prospect versus a staple in the division. I fully expect this one to probably get bumped up a little bit. J.J. Aldrich, one of my favorite fighters that has kind of flown under the radar quite a bit, really showed off some serious improvement in her game her last time out against Jillian Robertson. Strong hips, good takedown defense. She's working with Lauren Murphy, Rocky, Tisha Torres. She's got Miranda Maverick out there with her. So good camp, showing those improvements. And she's one of these unassuming looking fighters that is far physically stronger than she really lets on. Like, you would not guess just by looking at her how solid she is. We've got a 1-inch reach advantage for J.J. Aldrich coming into this fight. Good footwork, knows how to strike, stay long. Like I mentioned, that sprawl before. She controls the range really well, but what she's going up against in Erin Blanchfield is something that she hasn't faced before, Brett. I actually looked at this thing originally, and I was like, man, this line is disrespectfully wide. I'm an Erin Blanchfield guy. I mean, I faded the market and took Erin Blanchfield in her last fight against Miranda Maverick. Felt really, really good about that, getting her at dog odds. Obviously, those days are long gone. The secret's out. Everybody knows how good she is now, so we're not going to get that kind of a price tag on her. But minus 550, minus 600 around the market, like, that seems pretty steep. Superbook Sports has her as a minus 550 favorite right now at this point. And then I kind of went back and I looked through J.J. Aldrich's opponents. And Brett, do you know she really hasn't fought a real wrestler her entire time in the UFC? Like, you look back at her fight with Jillian Robertson, and guys, I know the running joke is that I'm a simp for Jillian, and we love Jillian around here because of my redhead addiction, but she needs to work on the wrestling. She's got dominant top position. She's got dominant jiu-jitsu, but she's not a wrestler. Erin Blanchfield is a monster. She is physically strong. She rides that body lock. She will punch her way into the pocket, grab a hold of you, and never let go. We saw her throw Miranda Maverick around not too long ago. She's going to be the best wrestler by far, and probably the most physically imposing fighter JJ has fought since her UFC tenure. After looking into that kind of detail, Brett, I think that's clear as day the path to victory for Blanchfield. JJ might have been able to sprawl on Jillian, who is shooting from 10 feet away. She's not going to be able to sprawl on someone like Erin, who's just going to walk her way in and grab the body lock. It's a different story. I don't think JJ can hold the range or the distance. I don't like the price tag necessarily, but I think Erin Blanchfield is deserving, and I don't mind throwing her in parlays. I kind of think it's Erin Blanchfield by decision. JJ is really tough to put away. She's not a girl that finishes or gives up her neck easily or quits. So I think it's kind of going to be a grind, and I expect Erin Blanchfield to get her hand raised by decision. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, no, good breakdown. I mean, the secret's out on Blanchfield, like you said. I didn't expect her to look as good as she has looked in this short of time in the UFC. I mean, shout out to my guy Sunsu, who's been talking about Blanchfield for the last 5 years as a legit prospect, and she's only like 23 years old now. And I think you have to put her into a category as a real prospect to watch for the future. And as good as she has looked, I will say that I'm still not 100% sold on Blanchfield, just because her her beating Sarah Alpar and, quite frankly, even Miranda Maverick, the way Maverick was defending takedowns, I didn't feel it was like such a high level performance where, as Blanchfield gets steps up in competition, that she's just going to easily be able to out wrestle and out grapple every single opponent she faces. I do expect her to, run into opponents who can defend takedowns, who can strike with her at range. And I would like to see her tested a bit more before I declare Blanchfield, the next champion or this and that. But as far as this particular matchup, I do think, like, obviously Blanchfield has advantages. She has a clear path to victory on the ground. Like you said, the problem with Aldrich is she hasn't really faced many wrestlers, and you could use that to Aldrich's advantage as well by saying we haven't seen Aldrich on her back for that long in the UFC, therefore maybe she's actually fine. Like, she ended up, Robertson took her back for a short period of time. She was able to reverse position, so she looked good in that exchange. She only spent like 12 seconds on the ground against Lauren Mueller. So there's nothing in Aldrich's tape to make me say, like, oh my God, if she gets taken down once, this fight's over. She absolutely has no takedown defense. I don't feel that way about Aldrich, but at the same time, Blanchfield's just aggression, her willingness to wrestle, even on the feet, her striking pace. I think the pace of this fight is going to be troublesome for Aldrich to keep up with, because even in that victory against Jillian Robertson, I mean, at distance, Aldrich landed 49 significant strikes. At distance, Robertson landed 45 significant strikes. Like, I thought Aldrich won that fight, but even if Aldrich could defend takedowns here, would you be confident that she would beat Blanchfield? Because I think Aldrich is a more technical boxer for sure. She's more comfortable, but she doesn't land strikes at a very high rate, and I really do like the pace of Blanchfield. So I think Blanchfield would need to get this fight to the ground at a high rate and control Aldrich on the ground for a long time to justify this price tag. I don't see Blanchfield necessarily being minus 500 to win, minus 600 to win, but I don't see her being that far off either. So I think Blanchfield deserves to be a considerable favorite in this fight. I think the most likely outcome is that she has ground success, that she probably dominates Aldrich to a degree and potentially even finds a submission, though I wouldn't project that outcome. And yeah, maybe Aldrich can prove us wrong, defend some takedowns, win competitive striking ranges at distance, but just Blanchfield has many more paths to victory, has a lot more finishing upside, I think. And so I'm comfortable with her being around this price tag.
I hear you, Brett. And honestly, man, I don't know if she even needs to get the takedowns. I could see this being a Holly Holm-esque grinder against the fence type of fight as well. You know what I mean? If she can't quite get the takedowns, I fully believe that she can. Don't get me wrong. But JJ is obviously working on her ground game. She's obviously getting better. She's not an easy person to hold down. She's got a good, intelligent get-up game from what we've seen. So, like, I do think there will be some back and forth there. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be easy. But at the end of the day, I do think that Blanchfield can simply body lock her and out-muscle her, pin her up against the fence, and grind minutes off that way, getting those dominant control time type of spots. So I think it's Erin Blanchfield all day in this spot. Like I said, I don't normally like to get tricky with the props on these kinds of situations, but I think that the durability of JJ is something we got to take into account. And then the style of Blanchfield is something we've got to take into account. It really spells decision for me. If we can get somewhere near even money on Blanchfield by decision, I don't think that's a half bad look, because I really don't see a finish happening one way or the other in this fight. JJ's either going to need to point strike her way to a victory, or either, again, control time against the fence, grappling. Really, the submission would kind of be the only worry that I would have about a finish. And at the same time, I already mentioned JJ doesn't really tap all that often. So I kind of think we're going to be able to get a nice break on the price tag, or parlay her up if that's the way you feel more comfortable doing it.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, if you can get Blanchfield by decision close to even money, I think that's a good play. I don't know if that line exists or not, but if it does, I think that's a decent way to get off her as a minus 500 favorite. And my only concern would just be, because we've seen Aldrich on the ground for maybe 30 seconds in the last, several years.
Hard to get a feel.
It's possible that if we now say, okay, Blanchfield gets 10 minutes of top control, well, maybe that just leads to a submission, and we should have known all along, and we just didn't because we hadn't seen Aldrich on the ground for that long. So that would be the only concern I have. However, again, if you're trying to get a minus 500 line down to a better price, the decision would be the way that I would go.
I hear you. All right. You know what? Our guy in the chat, Anton, has the right move here. We went over that one well enough. We don't need to waste our time on the biggest favorite on the card. We tend to agree here. Next fight up, we've got Andreas Michailidis taking on Rinat. Fakhretdinov. You would have thought with the long weekend I would have practiced that last name, but sorry, folks. I'm out here sipping Mai Tais and enjoying myself instead of prepping for the show. So, no, I don't have any idea how to pronounce Rinat's last name. I do apologize. I'll be listening to the weigh-in show and see what Anik has to say.
I think it's Fakhretdinov.
Fakhretdinov. Okay, that makes sense, actually, now that you say that. I think I can get there. Fakhretdinov. All right. So we've got Andreas Michailidis making his return. The weird thing about this fight that I just want to jump on straight off the bat is these guys, unless I'm mistaken, are both dropping to 170 pounds for this fight. So we've got Andreas Michailidis, someone who's fought all the way up at 205 already, and he's dropped down to 185. Now he's dropping all the way down to 170. I mean, in his last fight against Alex Pereira, he definitely looked to be a bit undersized. It's just crazy when these guys drop multiple weight classes. You never know what they're going to look like. This will be one I've got circled for the Friday Undefeated Post Weigh-In show to see what they look like on the scales. UFC debutant in his opponent. So Rinat looking good at 20-2, man. We know what these debutants can tend to look like on the regional scene. Interesting to see if that carries over to the UFC, though. He's an early finishing monster, just coming off that round one knockout of Eric Spicely. Spicely, a guy who I thought was a complete fraud, one of my favorite fades in the UFC while he was with the organization. So I'm not overly impressed by that. Very active with his lead left hand. He knows how to strike long, but boy, does he swing for the fences. Big winging overhand right. He's got a nice little fadeaway left hook. Decent level changes, but he throws everything into everything. So he tires out in round two. Almost every fight that I've seen get to round two. The problem is most of them don't survive round one. He's got a really suspect record. Lots of 0-0 opponents, lots of 0-1 type of opponents, 11 wins by knockout. Andreas Michailidis, we've seen this guy a couple times in the UFC. Not overly impressive, but a BJJ black belt. Good ground and pound when he can get it there. My favorite thing about his striking is his leg kicks. He's a bit disrespectful on the feet, though. He comes in with his hands down, swinging bombs from the hips. This is great matchmaking. Like, these guys are going to throw down. I think the answer is probably violence. Like, one of these dudes is getting knocked out or submitted in this fight. It's just a question of who. I don't really have any interest in laying minus 275 on a UFC debutante. Not my move. Not something I like to do. I parlayed a UFC debutant at that price tag once for a big bet, and it bit me right in the ass. And I went, okay, anytime someone's making their debut, I'm going to be very careful about picking my spots. And this is such a variance-ridden fight. I feel like either of these guys can get clipped and dropped. If Michailidis goes to the grappling the way that he did against Pereira, I actually kind of think he can pull the upset here as the guy with the UFC level experience, but he's kind of a gas bag himself, so you can't really count on him taking a fight deep. Man, Brett, I mean, do you have any nuggets for me, man? What do you have on this one? It's kind of dog or pass for me, but I don't feel good about it.
It's a really tough fight to call, especially because I still just don't feel comfortable. I don't totally know how good Michailidis is. And like you mentioned, the weight drop to 170 doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. Like, even more so, it concerns me for Michailidis, I guess, who we've already seen compete at 205 and 185 in the UFC. But I'm not 100% certain that it's true. Like, I won't be surprised if they're actually just competing at middleweight, because that seems like their typical divisions. But it's just another aspect of variance in the fight that concerns me. As far as Fakhretdinov, like, his record is definitely suspect. Wins over Eric Spicely and Alberto Udo do not mean much to me. And I think that's definitely important to note when, like, that's the highlight of his career, a 55-second knockout against Eric Spicely, where he was just throwing down like a maniac in front of Dana White trying to get a contract. That it doesn't tell me much. I still need to see more. I I actually do think he's a pretty good wrestler, though. And I kind of bill him more as a wrestler than a striker because, like, what we've seen from him on the feet is just winging punches, being aggressive. I don't really think that's his true style of fighting. I think that's kind of him saying, I'm so good, I'm going to fight wherever I want. I'm just going to knock you dead. And that's basically exactly what happened. I do think we're going to see him wrestle more in the UFC. Shoots a lot of double legs against the cage, capable wrestler, can, 2 to 3 takedowns per round. He's a more processed fighter, in my opinion, than Michailidis, who I don't totally know what Michailidis is even going to try and do. Like, he may look to strike, and he's capable, but for a little bit. He may look to grapple, but can he go 15 minutes grappling? I don't really know. So I think there are a lot of outcomes in this fight, and I favor Fakhretdinov because I just feel he's more processed. I worry about Michailidis' cardio, but like, we have not seen him defend a takedown in the UFC. So maybe he just is a decent takedown defender and just stuffs Fakhretdinov off the bat, and then they're just swinging wildly at each other and kind of, who knows. Also, the BJJ credentials of Michailidis kind of interest me because even if Fakhretdinov is on the ground, in theory, Michailidis should have some understanding of what's happening, which a lot of fighters do not seem to have. But the cardio, I think, is the biggest issue for me with Michailidis because I can't. Maybe he could win just striking exchanges over 15 minutes. Maybe he could randomly knock Fakhretdinov out. It's really hard to project those outcomes, and ultimately, I trust the solid wrestling that I've seen from Fakhretdinov over everything else. I'm not certain he actually will wrestle. He might still try and just knock Michailidis' head into the front row in 30 seconds, but that's my lean. And I understand why he's a favorite here, but not a fighter that I would be looking to buy at, what's his current price, like minus 270 or so.
Minus 275.
That's too wide. I have him projected as the favorite. I don't have him projected, or I don't have him capped this wide. And at the same time, Michailidis, like, there might be value on his line, but I would prefer to know kind of his game plan or like what he wants to do in order to be taking these big underdog shots. So it's more of a fight that I'm looking to just kind of gather data on these guys, see how they look like. I know Michailidis looked good against KB Bular in 15 minutes. That means almost nothing to me. I think
means absolutely nothing.
I think this was a big step up in competition. And again, I think it's going to be fun. I will lean toward the more processed wrestler in Fakhretdinov, but I think there's a lot of different potential outcomes in this fight.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Brett. It's one that fireball and popcorn, if you will, folks. From a betting perspective, trust me, you don't want to be any way away from the TV for this one, though. Usually when we say fireball and popcorn, it's because you don't give a shit about what's going on the tube. Not this one. This one could be over in about 30 seconds. This one could be a back and forth war. Get your notepad. Get some info on this one because we're going to learn a little bit about these fighters, unless, of course, one of them gets clipped on the first punch, and then we'll learn absolutely nothing. I do want to point out again, though, my guy Uncle Wheezy in the chat, Caesar's made a huge mistake. Pricing fight doesn't go the distance at minus 115. Already got a max 5-unit bet on this one. Their combined pro fights have finished inside the distance, 32 out of 37. I completely agree with Uncle Wheezy on the violence. If you guys can get a good line on that, he probably bet it to hell, so it's probably completely gone, but good for the people to know. Quick shout out, our guy Timothy Watson with the $9.99 donation. Thank you again so much, Timothy. We appreciate you. Again, Pub Sports Radio, we will thrive off of these donations. It definitely goes to keeping the lights on and bringing the free sports betting content to you guys. All right, so we're through a couple of fights here, everybody. Do me a favor, smash that like button. We got 133 live viewers. And just so everybody knows, anybody curious, if you feel like putting on your tinfoil hat and rocking with me, Game 7, NHL tonight. We got the Hurricanes and the Rangers. My degenerate action is under. I got the under 1.5 at minus 155. I sprinkled the no goal in the first period at plus 280. I took the under 5.5 at minus 140. And I sprinkled the no goal in regulation. So saying this thing is 0-0 through 60 minutes, That's 50-1. So if you just want to throw like a little dart with me, it probably won't get there. If we can get out of that first period without a goal, I'll be happy and we'll be well on our way. That's what I'm on tonight. So for any of you degenerates that feel like rocking, that's where we're at. All right, next fight up. Jeff Molina, El Jefe, taking on Master Z, Zhalgas Zhumagulov. I started calling the guy Master Z back before I could pronounce his last name. So that's where that nickname came from, if anybody wants to know. My guy, El Jefe. I told you guys how high I am on Jeff. He came on the Friday undefeated post-weigh-in show one time. We're looking to set that up again. Then he got the fight scheduled. So, I'm hoping he will be kind enough to come back and do that with us again sometime. Kid is a complete degenerate. He loves his gambling over there with James Krause and Glory MMA. They like to bet on fights. I am all about it. So I am, knee deep, heart deep, in over my head on Jeff Molina. I pointed him out as my favorite up-and-coming UFC prospect at the end of last year when he first got signed. So, I had eyes on the kid from, a talent level perspective, and then he came on the show, and now he tweets at me. I'm like, okay, that's it. It's a bromance with Jeff Molina for me. So you all know already I've bet Jeff Molina. I actually think it's a good bet, but the heart is a little involved, so take that with a grain of salt. I'll fully admit when that's the case, but I think I got a good number on him. I tweeted this out last week. He was minus 155, so I got 3.1 units on him to win 2 at that line, and I love that spot. He's all the way up at minus 190 at this point. That's where the price is getting a little bit too steep for me. I think anything under minus 200 is probably okay. Zhalgas is one of these guys that you can simply never count out. Ton of experience over on the Russian scene, grinding with those wrestlers over there. He's 14-6. He's solid. He is not a guy that you can look past. He is not a guy that you can just easily get one over. He's coming off that round 1 starching by Manal Kopp. Doesn't really show what this guy is fully capable of. So this is a decent step down in competition for him. However, since being in the UFC, his only win is over Jerome Rivera. Granted, he got Jerome out of there early, treated him like the step down in competition that he was. I guess I'll say it that way. But Zhalgas is completely well-rounded. Good, solid grappling, relatively durable. The Kopp fight obviously being a bit of an outlier. Decent striking. He does tend to load up on his big overhands and wing heavies, that kind of thing. But he's got good footwork, good head movement. He can be kind of tough to pin down. The thing for me with Jeff Molina, he's training at Glory. Brandon Moreno just went out there to train with him. I mean, that is the guy that I was like, Jefe reminds me of a young green Moreno. If there was a fighter that I'm like, take him under your wing and show him what the next level looks like, it would be exactly Brendan Moreno. So getting rounds in with a championship caliber fighter, I think is going to do wonders for Jeff Molina's game. He's already good in scrambles. He's already got good solid submission defense. He's already got good footwork. He's a volume-based striker. When he wants to sit down on those punches, kid's got some pop in his hands, but he knows better than to go for broke on every single punch. He's got 15 minutes of gas, and he got chin-checked by Iori Quilang. He took those shots no problem and kept coming. So I'm not worried about the durability of Jeff Molina. I'm not worried about the quit of Jeff Molina. It doesn't exist. Kid is a dog. I love minus 155. The only concern I have on Jeff Molina is he's got a 37% takedown defense rating. Now, I would be remiss not to tell you that that was a bit of an issue, but his get-up game is on point. It's like when I talk about Jamal Hill, where I'm like, I don't care that he gets taken down because the kid gets back up. That's exactly how I feel about Jeff Molina. I think Zhalgas is probably going to come out and look to grapple. This fight might play out a little bit closer. Jeff Molina is going to be winning minutes when these guys are at striking range. He'll be faster. He'll be striking in combinations. I think he's got a definite edge there. And if he can just avoid getting wet blanketed for 15 minutes, Brett, I think Jeff Molina comfortably wins a 15-minute decision in this spot. Maybe a late finish. I kind of expect this one to go all 15, but I definitely think Jeff Molina is getting his hand raised on Saturday. How about you?
Well, you said he reminds you of Brandon Moreno. He reminds me of like a Diaz brother, to be quite honest. Just super high volume boxing, not like the most incredible knockout power, really scrambly, good cardio. I like Jeff Molina, and I think he's a really cool guy, and I think he's deserved all the praise that he's gotten to this point, and he's totally earned the victories he's gotten in the UFC. I have some long-term concerns with him, and to me it comes down a little bit more to like his pure physicality and athleticism. And I hate even saying this because like I think he's a really good person, and I don't want to it's not necessarily all in his control. Just when I see him in physical exchanges, I don't see him coming out on top in the top half of this division. I think there's a lot of really physical, especially wrestlers in this division who he's going to be at a disadvantage against a lot of them. And I'm kind of looking to fade him in the long run. The lack of physicality to my eye, plus the fact that he's defending takedowns at 37%, plus the fact that he's absorbing 6 strikes per minute, there's a lot of early red flags for me here that when you combine that with how popular he is on MMA Twitter and among the UFC organization, I just worry about him stacking up these wins against Jacob Silva and Ori Kilang and David De Silva, whatever his name is, and then just the betting lines getting a little bit too out of control. So it's a fighter who I think has skills, but someone who I'm looking to shy away in the long run. However, I really don't know if Zhalgas is the spot for me to take a stand, and ultimately it's not. I'm not betting Zhalgas here. I think Molina gets the win. I really like his cardio. I really like his toughness. I really like his ability to string punches together. Like he landed 127. That number comes to mind. 127 significant strikes in the third round alone against Ori Kilang. Like that's not an accident. That's someone who's throwing strikes at a pace that almost no one's going to match. And especially in round 3, I like fighters who can build. We're going to see a lot of fighters on this card who can do that for the first 2 minutes of their fight and then slow down dramatically. Molina's a guy who can build. So he definitely has path to victory in the UFC, and it's going to be with that volume. It's going to be when he gets taken down, like you said. He has a good get-up game. He has good jiu-jitsu. I think Zhalgas could make it competitive. I just don't really trust Zhalgas over 15 minutes. He's like probably a step up in competition over Molina's past opponents. He's pretty small though. He's 5'4". He's going to be at a few inch reach disadvantage. Zhalgas is absorbing 5 significant strikes per minute too. Just knocked out by Kopp. I didn't even think he looked good against Jerome Rivera. I thought his grappling.
I bet Jerome Rivera that night, Brett.
I didn't bet Zhalgas, but I was very heavy on Zhalgas, especially from a DraftKings perspective, and I thought it was going to look easy, and I was pretty nervous.
I loved how that fight was going, man. I was like, Jerome, like, as long as he doesn't get tapped on the chin, I think he's got the skills to win this fight. And of course, he gets dropped and clubbed and subbed after it was starting to look good.
He was having success early, and it just kind of tells me that like anyone can have success against Zhalgas to a degree. And I mean, Paiva, I thought that decision was close, but like Zhalgas could take Molina down because Molina doesn't defend takedowns well, and Zhalgas can attempt takedowns at a kind of low pace. I don't see him being able to hold Molina down for long periods of time. I don't see him being able to submit Molina. When Molina takes bigger steps up in competition, those are things that are going to concern me, but I don't think a lot of people are worried about the wrestling here. I'm not that worried. Even if he gets taken down once or twice over 15 minutes, which is probably what I would project for Zhalgas' takedowns, that's just not enough equity to really win rounds or win a decision, even though it's possible. It can make rounds competitive. And on the feet, like the best Zhalgas has ever looked was in the first few minutes against Kopp, where he was throwing at a really high pace. He's pretty technical. It's just, it only took Kopp 4 minutes to knock him out. And I don't think we're going to see that same outcome from Molina, but I really worry about Zhalgas in extended fight. So I think early on, this could be very competitive. Zhalgas could be on top. Zhalgas could be winning striking exchanges. He could win the first round. I'm much, much less confident that he's going to be consistently winning round 2 and round 3 as he slows against a guy who builds. So I have this projected capped around where it should be. I think what the line you got makes sense. And it's probably not a line that I would be betting, but I don't think it's out of the range of possibilities by any stretch. I don't hate the idea of someone taking a dog shot on Zhalgas at this stage. I think if he wins, it's probably by decision. I think he very well could make rounds competitive. And over the long run, I'm going to be very hesitant about backing Molina against anyone with a physical game, especially one who can wrestle. I don't see enough of it in Zhalgas's game for me to pick the underdog here. So I'm going with Molina. I won't be surprised to see him win clean rounds or even stop Zhalgas late, although I do expect early on Zhalgas has enough tools to make this fight competitive, most likely.
Completely agree, Brett. I do think that it's going to be interesting early. I think that the pace that Molina sets is going to be something that sets him apart the deeper the fight goes. I don't know if we see the finish from him, but I think it'll be possible. I think it could be there. And Uncle Wheezy out here, folks, doing the Lord's work. He does his own show with Brady right here on Pub Sports Radio on Sundays, and he still hangs out live for our show here on the Die Hard MMA podcast. Love Wheezy. It's Stat Daddy for MMA, baby. He's coming in here saying that there are 3 of 14 takedown attempts and 3.14% control time in 4 fights. That speaks to what I was saying, where I don't think that he is going to be able to control Molina. Even if he does get a takedown, Molina's getting right back up from this guy. So I don't think this is the spot. I can understand some of your concerns, going forward, Brett. Absolutely. For me, I think he's got the raw tools. He's got the raw skill set, especially if he's training with a guy like Moreno, that, that scrambling jiu-jitsu game that can counteract a lot of the wrestling that we're talking about. So personally, I'm buying my guy Jeff Molina moving forward, and I'll ride that baby till the wheels fall off. I think he's got the upside, but I completely understand the concerns. I just think he's young enough that some of those red flags are things that can be ironed out as he continues on. We'll find out. Time will tell, with those kinds of things. Drew in the chat. What's up, buddy? Thank you for hanging out, my guy. All right. That's a good fight breakdown for us there, Brett. I think so far we've pretty much agreed on the first 3 fights of the night, have we not?
Yeah, to some degree. I think it's the problem with this card is it's really hard to be like, oh my God, Fakhretdinov is going to murder Michailidis. I'm planting my flag on it, right? It's hard to take big stands, but we'll see how it goes. We got 11 fights left.
Yeah, we got some later, I think, that we can plant a couple flags on. So everybody, do me a favor, smash that like button. We've got over 140 live viewers. I'm joined by Brett Apley from the Mayo Media Network tonight, breaking down UFC Vegas 56. Next fight up, Tony Gravely taking on Johnny Munoz Jr. And Brett, I got a fun one for this one. So first and foremost, cards on the table. I bet Johnny Munoz. I like Johnny Munoz as the underdog here in this spot. And I kind of pulled my notes up here. It's nice, actually, that I bought a nice camera for the show instead of using my phone, because now I can actually look at it.
And you look fantastic.
Thank you. I got Johnny Munoz, 2 units, plus 125 is the line that I got on him here. Guys, if you've been watching this show for any length of time, most of I'm a Gravely hater. Not that I hate him as a person or anything like that, but from a betting perspective, I just think he's got holes in his game that can be taken advantage of. And if you target the right type of fighter, they're going to be able to get wins over him. And he's constantly going to be overpriced because he does win minutes. He's got that style that it just works against too many people. And then I think he gets overvalued, and I try to go the other way against him because of that. This is a spot where I think that's exactly the case. I think Johnny Munoz Jr. has everything it's going to take to be able to take advantage of the holes in Gravely's game. Now, a lot of people talk about Gravely's gas tank. He's not a gasser. He's got 15 minutes worth of gas. But if you can force him into uncomfortable positions, he's breakable. That's kind of the way I think that I want to word it. The perfect example for me is the Brett Johns fight. Tony Gravely's been tapped before. He's got a little bit of submission defense issues. He gives up his back a little too often for my liking. Johnny Munoz Jr. is a sniper on the mat, world-class BJJ. This guy is somebody you do not want on your back. And Tony Gravely just gets his back taken way too often for me. So I think he can win rounds via backpack. We've seen that work for fighters like Aljamain Sterling very recently. Plus, if he gets on his back, I think there's a very real chance that he finishes the job that Brett Johns couldn't, because Johns had a rear naked choke in deep and could not quite get the tap that night. Munoz will finish that submission if he gets into that spot. And then when it comes to the striking, I think based on the tape, I favor Gravely just ever so slightly. But Munoz is the kind of guy who's got the right style where I expect improvements. He's young. I think he's the real prospect of the two. He's got a good rangy kicking game. I think that he'll be able to make the type of improvements that he needs to. And if he can control the range a little bit better, he can also win minute striking. Now, that's a little bit of a blind leap of faith that I think he's going to be better than what we've seen so far. But I do think it's kind of a paper, rock, scissors type of situation where if he has made those improvements, he can win on the feet. The best part about this bet, you guys, the absolute best part about this bet is none other than Said Yakub Kakramanov, the UFC fighter, tweeted at me that he likes my pick and said Tony Gravely sucks. So I don't know if we want to put, too much faith into that because he doesn't appear to like Tony Gravely. But I kind of respectfully tweeted back that I was like, well, I don't think he sucks, but I think this is a good opportunity to bet against him. And he goes, no, I think he sucks. So I had a good time with that one, but I'm on the dog, guys. I like Munoz. I think he's got the higher ceiling of the two. I kind of think the UFC is at the point where they're kind of selling a little bit on Tony Gravely. I don't know that we're going to see much improvement out of him. He's been around for a long time. It's been kind of the same story every time. He gets his neck caught in guillotines and just barely manages to survive them. He gives up his back, manages to tuck his chin. He's been this close to being subbed in like 3 of his fights.
Brett Johns subbed him, by the way. Brett Johns got him late in the 3rd round.
Yes, I meant in the 1st. I'm sorry. I apologize. He did end up getting him late, but he was like under the chin in round 1 and almost got him out of there much, much earlier. I just think he's a liability when it comes to the grappling. And especially, like I said, you get him uncomfortable. You turn the grappling on him, something that Munoz can do. He does have a good body lock. He does have decent double legs and level changes. I don't know that he's going to be successful, but Tony Gravely's got a 50% takedown defense. For a guy that's supposed to be, a wrestler as his main course of victory here, he doesn't defend takedowns very well. If you flip the tables on him, that's when he gasses. That's when he gets tired, and then I think he will give up a sub. So I got Munoz plus 125, and then I think later on in the week, depending on the number, obviously, I'll probably add that submission, or maybe he'll go in my submission special parlay that I like to do. But, I'm on the dog here, Brett. What about you?
Yeah, I was going to say the only thing is if it was me, I would probably be taking the submission prop because I feel Munoz's biggest advantage clearly is his submission grappling game and the fact that Gravely keeps sticking his neck out. He's been submitted a bunch of times. Like if I told you this fight goes to decision, do you think it's a 50-50 fight? Would you still favor Munoz outright?
I mean, if it goes to decision, I do think it favors Gravely. Probably some more top control with the wrestling, maybe a little bit better striking. But kind of like I said, I am buying just a little bit on the fact that I think that Munoz has more room to grow than Gravely does. Yeah. So that kind of makes it a little bit closer for me when it comes to what we're going to see on Saturday.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think that's the only thing for me. I think I would be betting Munoz by submission rather than as his money line, because I think the only way for him to win this fight clearly is to get a submission. I think that's very realistic. Gravely is not a fighter that I typically like to back, though I do think he's very processed, and he averages 6.7 takedowns per 15 minutes. We saw his upside in his last fight against Simon Oliveri, landed 11 takedowns. And he almost got submitted in that fight too. He put himself deep in a couple chokes that I was impressed to see him fight out of. But I do like the fact that Gravely consistently goes to his takedowns. We can count on that from him. I think the takedowns are going to be there for Gravely again. I think he's a very good wrestler. It's just that he doesn't have any level of control. And against a fighter like Munoz, who may be levels ahead of him as a submission grappler, like, if Gravely is winning this fight through his takedowns, he is going to be going in and out of the fire constantly for 15 minutes. And he still just may win the fight that way because Munoz may be on his back more often than not. But like, even in Gravely's best case scenario where he's controlling top position, landing takedowns, he's going to be giving Munoz the opportunities that Munoz wants to win this fight. And that really concerns me. So I don't know how this fight's going to play out. I think Munoz has much more finishing upside. Munoz has some wrestling potential as well. I really didn't like his first round in his last fight against, what was that guy's name? Jamie Simmons, because I was really, really big on him. I thought Munoz had a very large submission grappling advantage, and he just didn't want to wrestle for pretty much the whole first round.
He made Simmons look half decent.
And the thing is, as soon as he did wrestle, it's like, wow, you got a submission 20 seconds later. Maybe you should have done that 4 minutes before. So I worry a little bit about IQ. Not that it's Munoz has a bad IQ. It's just he already showed us in his last fight he might want to go out there and strike. So if we see him go out there and strike again against Gravely, I won't be too surprised. He could still maybe beat Gravely. At this point in their respective careers, I would favor Gravely to win striking exchanges over 15 minutes. He's got power in his hands. He averages 3.9 significant strikes per minute. He's not some striker that I would be fearful of, but I just haven't seen enough from Munoz to assume Munoz will beat him on the feet. And it probably comes down to a submission, quite frankly, because if Munoz can land takedowns with any consistency, he's taking the back because Gravely's giving up his back to stand up. He's probably getting a rear naked choke. If Gravely takes him down, it's either Gravely controlling bits and pieces of this fight for 30 seconds at a time, winning a decision that way, or he's getting caught in a submission. And Munoz can reverse position, take the back in a trans. Munoz is an excellent submission grappler, very fast in transition on the mat. So I really, really do think the submission is live for Munoz. I just am not confident necessarily in any other aspect of the fight. So I tend to maybe lean slightly toward Gravely here, just being the more processed fighter who I kind of know what to expect from on the feet, who I kind of know what to expect from in terms of his ability to land takedowns. But Munoz could finish this fight literally at any time. And Munoz has the upside of, like you mentioned, Gravely's takedown defense isn't very strong. Munoz has the upside of just landing a takedown himself and demolishing Gravely in a grappling exchange. So I don't hate the idea of being on the underdog here at all. I think it's going to be a very, very fun fight. I'll probably be pretty high on this fight from a DraftKings perspective as well.
Yeah, I think this is a good one to target in DraftKings for sure, because one way or the other, somebody probably is scoring relatively well in this particular fight. There goes the degenerate flyer there. Thanks a lot, Zibanejad, scoring the first goal of the game that quickly. Sure. Yeah, so I mean, my guy MMA Locker Room really likes Gravely in this spot too. So I totally understand what you're saying. I do think that maybe the line is correct-ish. I don't know. I'm high again. I target Gravely as a favorite. Try to get on the other side of him with a fighter that's got the skill set.
Munoz could look like a -300 favorite in hindsight because he could go out there and submit Gravely in the first round. He really could. And Gravely's upside is maybe it's not that high because if Gravely wins, I see it being a close kind of wrestling match. So I think in hindsight, it's very possible that Munoz could look a lot better than his current number.
Yeah. And honestly, I think you hit the nail on the head. And Wheezy in the chat tending to agree with you here, Brett, that not that I'm comparing him to Khabib, like stylistically or ceiling-wise or anything like that, but it reminds me of the time that Khabib went 15 minutes with Al Iaquinta because he just wanted to show off some of his striking chops. He's the wrestler. He felt no fear from his opponent whatsoever, so he got some rounds in. You know what I mean? That's kind of what that first round with Simmons felt like to me, that he just was not afraid of this man whatsoever, so he kind of took his time a little bit. And I mean, I'm assuming, obviously, I don't have a fighter interview to point to where he admits to doing that or anything like that, but we've seen that before. We have seen fighters do that kind of thing before, and especially when they're young and they're at the UFC level and they need to get kind of those minutes under their belt so they're comfortable going longer in fights. I don't think that's a bad thing. until I see something otherwise, that's how I'm going to treat that fight, is that he basically played with his food just a little bit to kind of give himself some minutes.
And that's totally fine. And that could absolutely be the case. And if that is the case, and he's like, okay, in this matchup, I'm going to play at XYZ. And in future matchups, I'm going to test out this. And that's fine. It's just, if it's the other case where he literally has no idea that he's a better grappler than his opponent and thinks that his best method is actually striking, then it's a concern. You're probably right. He probably was just playing around. But
we don't know.
He'll have an opportunity to prove exactly what he's all about here and going forward.
Yep, it'll be fun. Very interesting. So slight disagreement from Brett and myself. He's leaning with the favorite. I'm leaning with the dog. Hey, we got 153 live viewers, everybody. Real quick, we want to hear a word from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back to the fights. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. We're talking UFC Vegas 56 with Brett Apley tonight, and here we have got a fight I'm very interested in. Benoit Saint-Denis returns to the UFC after that life-changing shit-kicking he took thanks to that Russian official who got pulled from the card that night after almost letting a man die on national television. He's returning against Niklas Stolze. And I was so high on Benoit Saint-Denis, Brett. I dodged the bullet of losing money on him that night because it was such a gigantic jump in competition for him to, take on Alonzo Zaleski dos Santos. But I thought he had a path to victory. And early in that fight, he looked pretty decent. And this kid's got some serious grappling chops. He's physically strong, former member of the French Special Services, extraordinarily strong. And the ability for him to take that kind of a beating in his UFC debut and not get out of that fight one way or the other, like just that kind of heart and toughness, this guy's a dog. I am looking forward to backing Benoit Saint-Denis a lot in his future if he turns out to be the kind of prospect that I think he is. The problem is I'm a little shell-shocked. I'm a little nervous because after getting his ass whipped, he comes back and now he's a minus 155 favorite over Niklas Stolze. And this is another spot, kind of like we talked about the one earlier in the night. Both guys are dropping. They're going down to 155 for this one. Both guys have been fighting at 170 previously. So there's some questions to me about, the size and the strength advantage, things like that. Swapping weight classes always makes me a little nervous. You're never sure what will and won't translate. But the one thing that should translate is Benoit Saint-Denis should have a wrestling and submission advantage. Now, Niklas Stolze knows what he's doing on the mat, too. He's very active off of his back. He likes to throw up submission attempts and things like that. I don't know that he's dangerous enough for someone like Benoit really to be concerned with him. I think he can get smothered on the ground. However, Niklas Stolze is training at Syndicate MMA, and this guy is tall and he is long. My favorite part of his game is those calf kicks that he hits people with. He is nasty at kicking range. He does blitz in. He knows how to use that reach and that length advantage. Very, very aggressive. And sometimes, you look back at his fight against Ramazan Emeev. He almost had that guy dead with that knee in round one. Like he knew Ramazan Emeev was going to shoot, timed it perfectly, threw that check knee up there, and almost had him out of there. Up against another grappler, that's a tool that I think we could definitely see coming into play yet again. So Niklas Stolze is going to be the better striker. We know Benoit Saint-Denis should be the better grappler. I believe that Benoit Saint-Denis can get on track here in this fight. I talked about it the last time he fought. I felt like the fact that he was making his UFC debut against Alonzo Zaleski dos Santos simply showed how high the UFC matchmakers believe this kid should be. I think they thought that he was capable of coming in that spot and having a good performance against a respected veteran with a dangerous skill set. It didn't pan out for him. He's getting a step down against a guy who's 0-2 in the UFC. I don't think Stolze is a slouch, and he's definitely in that back against the wall type of situation, going 0-2, got to get a win to save your job. That's a spot that I usually like to kind of back on if the fighter is half decent because, everything's on the table for them that night. I really want to bet Stolze, Brett. I really want to bet Stolze, but the problem is this is where I'm trying to be more intelligent with the way I play everybody. I'm trying to do better. I think he wins this fight. I don't think I need to lay minus 155 to find out. What are you doing on this one, Brett?
Well, you said you really wanted to bet Stolze. You mean Saint-Denis?
I'm sorry, Saint-Denis. Yes,
okay.
I'm a believer in Saint-Denis. Okay. I think he's got the tools. I like this kid's future from what I see. If he evolves and everything catches up to the grappling, I think he's going to be a monster. I just don't know if he should be minus 155 in this spot. And he's only taken 6 months off after that beating from Zhalgas dos Santos. We've seen those quick turnarounds cause problems with durability for people before. I don't want to bank on that being a problem. He's shown nothing but toughness and durability, so I'm not questioning him. But again, minus 155, I don't know if I like the price.
Yeah, I don't like the price enough to bet either side here. It's another fight where I need to see more to really understand who these guys are. And yeah, the UFC matchmakers might have thought that he was a good prospect and that he would be able to compete with Zhalgas dos Santos, but they were not correct. That was one of the worst beatings of all time. And unfortunately, it's put this dynamic on Saint-Denis, which is the same thing that we saw with Chris Moutinho, where like he got the absolute crap beat out of him for 15 minutes by Sean O'Malley, and the narrative coming off that fight was that Moutinho's such a tough guy, and ultimately we found out that he might be tough, he's just not very good, and that's what I'm afraid of with Saint-Denis. Like, he is tough, absolutely. He has a military background. I do not question this guy's heart. I don't really care how tough he is if he's going to absorb 9.9 strikes per minute and defend strikes at 42%. Zaleski's a good fighter, and this is a definite step down in Stolze, but like we just saw, in my opinion, Saint-Denis lacking in skill. He did not defend strikes very well. He could not compete at range with Zaleski, and so it just would not be surprising to me if he still could not defend strikes very well. And the other thing is, if the ref had stepped in round 2, like he should have, I don't know that people would be saying the same thing. People probably wouldn't be saying he's so tough. People would be saying this guy sucks. He got KO'd in round 2. And like, I feel that the fact that he literally survived, the fact that his brain survived an extra 7 minutes is pushing this line probably higher than what it should be. He still may very well beat Stolze. He may be the more physical fighter here. He may be the better wrestler, but I'm not that convinced by it. The problem is I just don't totally know how the fight's going to play out. Like, yes, Stolze got out-grappled by Ramazan Emeev. Saint-Denis is not as good of a wrestler-grappler as Emeev. He might have some level of submission ability that Emeev doesn't possess, because Emeev doesn't really attack submissions very often. So if Saint-Denis came in here, took Stolze down, held him down, submitted him, I wouldn't be shocked. If he held him down for a couple rounds, I wouldn't be shocked. We just saw Stolze get KO'd by Jared Gooden in the first round. I wouldn't be shocked if Saint-Denis knocked him out. Like, there's a lot of outcomes here. But on the flip side, Stolze took down Emeev. Could he take down Saint-Denis? Are we so confident in Saint-Denis' defensive grappling coming off Brave FC? I'm not particularly confident. We just saw him eat a ton of strikes and get hurt over and over again. Would it be shocking if Stolze won this fight by knockout? Not to me. So I think there are too many potential outcomes for me to really take a stand here. I do think Saint-Denis could win this fight, but it's probably either going to be a quick KO or wrestling based, and it's just a bit hard to cap. So it's a possible outcome. I think Stolze may be just simply undervalued because he just fought Emeev and Jared Gooden, who are steps above Saint-Denis, and perhaps Stolze just proves he's a more technical striker here. I think he's also a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. It's around the same level as Saint-Denis. Perhaps he is actually a better submission grappler than Saint-Denis. Perhaps he can get top position of his own. It's not a fight that I'm looking to bet. I think it's going to be a very fun fight, and I pray that Saint-Denis doesn't eat as many strikes in this fight as he did in his last one. We get another ref kicked out of the organization. It's going to be fun, though. I think it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it, and that's about all I got for that fight.
I hear you. So for me, I'm leaning with the favorite. I'm kind of leaning under. I don't mind violence here in this spot because I do think, especially after that last fight, if he's getting lit up on the feet, I think a more competent referee will stop the fight sooner in this one. So kind of expecting some violence here. And I think it's going to be a sub by Saint-Denis. But again, lots of questions. Brett kind of nailed it. This is one of those ones with a lot of different outcomes on the spectrum. By the way, update on the bet. Sorry, everybody. The officials in this game apparently like calling power plays tonight. So the under, rest in peace there on the under 1.5. Holy shit. It's 2-0 Rangers already.
Damn.
What? Yeah. You know what? When you've got 3 penalties called in the first 9 minutes of a hockey game, it's like, yeah, under probably isn't going to look too good after that. So not off to a great start with the DGen action. Sorry, everybody. Next fight up, we are looking at Osbourne taking on Zarrukh Adashev. And Brett, I got a little bit of a hot take on this one.
Do you?
I got a little bit of a hot take on this one. I see everyone piling in on Osbourne. And some of my buddies, some people I respect, by the way, Locker Room, if you're still listening, I know you hate me at this point. They're like, Locker Room did an interview with Osbourne. Huge fan of I've backed him before. I like the guy. I like his skill set. So definitely somebody that I've looked to get behind myself. But I do think he's got some holes in his game. He cut down to 125, and we saw him not be able to go a full 15 minutes confidently down at 125. I think that weight cut is really strenuous on him. I think he's got a high work rate, and it tends to drain on that gas tank. I do like the teep, that front kick up the middle that he has. He's got some good fadeaway counters. He does keep the range relatively well early in the fight. I do think the cop fight, was stopped a little bit early. They should have let him recover, give him an opportunity there. He wasn't out cold in that spot. So there's maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh on here at this point. But what we've seen is that he's got, numbers based. I'm not being harsh here. This is legitimate facts. He's got a 42% striking defense, Brett. This guy gets hit a lot. And even though he's got an 8-inch reach advantage, at these smaller classes, speed kills. What we see is these guys that have that reach advantage, it's not always a positive because they can't reload quickly enough to defend themselves. Zarrukh Adashev, while he's 4-3, was a former pro kickboxer. He's got plenty of experience on the feet. And I feel like he got to the UFC maybe just a little bit too soon. He got that early short notice, jumped into the UFC situation where he got starched in the first round. We see that time and time again. That's a regular old story. Now he's here, and we're starting to see the improvements. He's starting to get up to speed. He had Benoit almost out of that fight in round 1 with his leg kicks. This guy has incredibly explosive leg kicks, good movement, good footwork. He's rounding out that jiu-jitsu. I think he just got his brown belt or something like that. So we know he's working on it. And he's training with guys like Frankie Edgar. So someone who's got a solid skill set that he'll be able to pull from. I know he's at a height and reach disadvantage. You don't necessarily want to be on that side of things. But I think the speed upside is going to be a problem here, Brett. People talk about Osbourne and his ability to take people down. He was like a collegiate wrestler, if I'm not mistaken. However, in the UFC, his grappling is not something that he's gone to very often. So if you want to take advantage of the weakness of your opponent, 1.09 takedowns per 15 minutes, only landing with a 25% accuracy, I can't count on to wrestle. So what I think this is going to be a striking match. We saw Zarrukh Adashev go a full 15 minutes not too long ago against Zhumagulov, a fighter that a lot of people thought was going to have him dead to rights, and quickly. He won a full competitive 15-minute fight. He's got a 65% striking defense. Zarrukh Adashev knows how to handle himself against these rangier fighters, and when he crashes the pocket, he hits hard and tight, man. I actually think he can spring the upset here. I'm relatively confident in saying that Zarrukh Adashev is being looked past by a lot of sports bettors in this spot. We've got Ode Osbourne, a minus 165 favorite. Zarrukh Adashev is a plus 145 underdog. I am tempted on taking Zarrukh Adashev at plus 145. I haven't made a move yet because I do think this line will get wider, but I expect to end up probably on the dog later in the week. Brett, what do you think about this matchup?
I don't think you're crazy. I definitely wouldn't be playing Osbourne at this number. I agree with a lot of what you said. Coming into the UFC, Osbourne was this guy who got early finishes, and that's pretty much the only thing that he did. And the problem with a lot of those fighters is they can't sustain their own style for 15 minutes. They tend to lose rounds. They tend to tire out. And it's like we just saw that happen against CJ Vergara, where he looked good early and tired out. And I think got held down for pretty much the entire third round.
Got the win, though. Got the win, though. Go, CJ.
Yeah, that performance from Osbourne kind of lets me know that he is still who we thought he was coming into the UFC. He's a guy who I think is very dynamic, very explosive early. He has knockout power. He has submission ability early, but this is not a guy that I want to be trusting to win decisions, especially at a minus 175 price. Adashev, I know a lot of people hate him, and he isn't. I don't think he's spectacular. I was on him coming into the UFC. I was on him against Tyson Nam, where he got brutally KO'd in a few seconds. And mostly I just thought I liked what I saw from him on the feet. I thought he was technical. I thought he had hand speed. I thought he could fight pretty consistently for 15 minutes. And then he just got KO'd immediately, and he was out of shape and whatnot. And I stuck with him against Zhumagulov just in the sense that I thought that he could still compete in that fight. And he put up a good showing. And I stuck with him again against Ryan Benoit. And I thought he looked pretty good again. So I still have the same basic read on Adashev, that he's a solid technical kickboxer. He can fight for 15 minutes. He has tools. I would say my biggest concern, and you mentioned that he almost got Benoit out of there in the first round. He almost got knocked out in the first round too. He got dropped and hurt very badly at the end of that first round. And we already saw him get knocked out in the first round by Tyson Nam. And against a fighter like Osbourne, who's going to be bigger, who's more explosive, who can hit hard, Osbourne could just go out there and knock him out in the first round. I think that's one of the more likely outcomes if Osbourne wins this fight at all, or, a quick takedown and a submission in the first round. I think those are pretty likely outcomes if Osbourne wins at all. If this fight gets extended, I have to assume that Osbourne's slowing down. I don't really agree with people who think he's just going to wrestle his way to victory outside of an early submission. He went 1 for 7 on takedowns against Vergara, who I still don't think is very good on the ground, and he gassed out doing it. So I don't see that path to victory being an easy one for Osbourne, even if he lands a couple takedowns here and there. I'm not sold on Adashev either. I'm not sold on the durability. I'm not sold on his wrestling. I know you said he has a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, perhaps, but I would need to see more of him on the ground to be confident there. I do just think if Adashev survives the first round, he could strike competitively with Osbourne. I know there's a reach advantage there for Osbourne, but I think that's going to be more impactful early when he can keep Adashev away from him. As he tires out, Adashev is probably going to be able to close the distance more effectively. Adashev just beat the crap out of Benoit's legs, though it was in a different stance than he'll be fighting against Osbourne, I believe. I think that's probably in his game, and I would assume that's how he would attack Osbourne, being that he's at such a reach disadvantage early. You can obviously attack the legs easier than you can land punches to the face. So I'm very curious to see how this fight plays out. I think Osbourne could look spectacular in another first-round finish, but you have to assume in an extended fight he tires out, and that's kind of the style of fight that would play to Adashev, being the more experienced, more technical striker, and just having more consistency in rounds 2 and 3. So that's kind of the general dynamic that I see in this one.
Okay. I like a lot of the things that you said there, Brett. I definitely think that, Ode Osbourne, we've seen him. He's a finisher. He absolutely can win this thing early. If he wants to go in there and land something big, it's possible. I kind of took the opposite, though, from the Zarrukh Adashev rocking against Ryan Benoit, just because for me, Benoit's one of these guys that I feel like I've had an extremely solid read on for the majority of his UFC run. That's all he had in that fight. I was like, look, so Benoit, if he goes out there and wrestles, because believe it or not, he's actually decent on the ground, he could make this thing look easy. Like if he goes out there and grapples, he could make that fight look easy. But if he chooses to strike, he's knockout or bust. And if he clips him with one big power shot, that could be it. It's over. So I wasn't surprised at all that he got clipped there. I was impressed that he was able to survive that, get back in the fight, and get back to work and win that fight. In a spot against Tyson Nam, dude, I don't knock him at all for the knockout loss to Tyson Nam. Like you mentioned, he rolled off the couch for that fight. He was not even close to in shape. I mean, had a belly and everything. And Tyson Nam is a guy with ridiculous power up a weight class. He just needed one. And against a smaller opponent that wasn't going to be able to go 15 minutes, he was a sitting duck. That's the kind of spot that I'm like, okay, you get a free pass. So personally, I'm not really questioning Adashev's chin. Maybe that'll come back and bite me here in this spot. I think he's underrated. I think he's live. I'm going to try and get the best number I possibly can in this spot, and then I'm going to back the dog. And I might be taking that round 3 sprinkle shot because we've seen Ode get hurt. We have seen him slow down. And especially if it happens late, I could see Adashev potentially finishing this fight. Probably more of a decision victory type of situation in a 15-minute kickboxing match, but can't count out that speed. Like I said, he can nuke people if he gets into boxing range. So we'll see what happens. Pray for me, Brett. That's not going to be a popular pick on the internet.
I don't think it's a horrible one either. And just to cap it off, like what you said about him surviving Benoit, I think that's correct too. To me, I'm concerned because I've seen him get hurt a couple times, and I'm also impressed because although he was hurt, he did survive. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. And ultimately, Osbourne's still defending strikes at like a very, very poor rate, 42%. Adashev, after fighting Sumudaerji, he's still defending strikes at 65%. It's the type of fighter that over an extended period of time, it just would not be that surprising to see him come out ahead. So yeah, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, my friend. I do appreciate it. I'm going to have a ton of action on this first fight back. Next fight up, everybody, we got Damon Jackson. The man got himself a short notice opponent. Daniel Argueta is filling in here. I was really sad, Brett. I was really, really sad when this fight got canceled or fell apart.
With Minner?
Damon Jackson was supposed to be fighting Derek Minner. And I was going to mortgage my house. I was going to pull every penny I owned to put on Damon Jackson because Minner is the king of gas bagging, man. Round 1 or bust, Derek Minner. And I thought that Damon Jackson would have what it took to stay safe, drag him into the second round, and then basically take him out of there. I was very much looking forward to that one, even at like a minus 300 price tag. I was happy to go at it. So here we go. Damon Jackson looking about the best he ever has, and roasted me for picking against him in his last fight on Twitter publicly. That was fun. He's coming in here, got good hands. He showed those off in his last fight. Some striking ability, some pop in his punches. He is still improving at this stage of his career. We all know how good he is on the ground. We know how he scrambles. We know how solid he is in the jiu-jitsu game. Taking on undefeated 8-0 Daniel I always want to say Ortega every time I see this thing because the T at the end of the name, Argueta. He's coming up here. He's a tough 29 competitor. If you guys watched that season of The Ultimate Fighter, he actually lost to Ricky Tercios, the guy who went on to be at the end of the show. He usually fights at 135, though, so this short notice opportunity is up a weight class for him. He did start his MMA career up at 150, 145-ish, so he's not, uncomfortable at this weight class. He kind of blitzes his way in to close that distance. He goes for the head and arm throws, which we don't see really work in men's MMA these days. Women's MMA still seems to get away with it, but if you give your back up like that at this stage in the UFC, that's a no-no. That's a bad move. He does keep a high pace, very active ground and pound. This kid mauls people from top position, but he's got a brick for a head. He's incredibly durable. I've seen him eat some big shots, and he just does not go down. I mean, I would love to make an argument for the dog here, Brett. I really would, but I don't think that I can. I just think
I can give you one if you need it.
Okay, all right. No, I can't wait to hear that. I mean, I think the wrestling side of things is kind of his best path to victory. If he can stay safe, if he can grind his way to a win, that's really the only way I see him getting it done. His durability checks out, so maybe that's a possibility. But I just think short notice, upper class, potential strength discrepancy, Damon Jackson with how slick he is on the mat, I can see him kind of getting this kid out of there with some submissions and things like that. But I'm now curious, Brett. I need some reasons. I want to hear it. Talk to me.
No, you mentioned it right out. It's the wrestling. And I mean, realistically, this is a straightforward fight with Argueta coming up on short notice, up a weight class against a physical grappler. And we've already seen in multiple instances where Argueta, he ended up on the bottom against Tercios. He was pretty much demolished. Even in his most recent fight on the regional scene in LFA, he was taken down very early in the first round, held on his back for pretty much the entire first round. So if Jackson gets on top of him, he's going to smother him. He's probably going to win this fight by submission, potentially later in the fight as Argueta tires. The only cases I can make for the underdog, which I still will because they're important, is I don't fully trust Jackson's durability. I know people think Topuria is a god, but Jackson was brutally knocked out in 10 seconds in PFL as well. So this guy can be hurt. And Argueta is not really a power striker, so I'm not picking that outcome. I'm not too worried by it. But Argueta is durable, and he could last 10 minutes in this fight. And would it be stunning to me because he's very aggressive, if he just randomly hurt Jackson? It wouldn't be stunning. I'm not picking that outcome, but that's one path to victory. The other one that I see is wrestling for Argueta, because I'm not a big fan of Charles Rosa, and Charles Rosa got Damon Jackson down a couple times, and that tells me that pretty much anyone can get Damon Jackson down. I'm not, even if that happens, I'm still not worried by it. I would favor Jackson to basically just get back up. But I don't love his takedown defense, which is like 35% currently. That's very, very poor. And granted, some of it's come against good competition. And I was on him against Mirsad Bektic, where he gave up 7 takedowns and he survived and won by submission late. That was an awesome performance. So I'm not worried about, I'm not worried about Argueta taking him down once and the fight's over, but Jackson can be taken down. And Argueta can wrestle. He's a decent wrestler. I obviously prefer him fighting at his typical weight class. He can throw ground and pound on top. So there are ways for him to at least survive, at least extend the fight, at least make a round or two competitive, potentially just KO Jackson cold. Jackson deserves to be a pretty heavy favorite here. I still think that the first few minutes of this fight could be competitive. Argueta's a real scrapper, but his cardio concerns me. His bottom game definitely concerns me. And Jackson is kind of firing on all cylinders right now. He's looked as good as he's ever looked. He is a good wrestler. Only a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, just submitted a black belt in Kirk. His submission grappling pedigree is strong. Most of his wins come by submission. And I think he'll probably have opportunities in the second half of this fight, or early, but in the second half of this fight especially. So Jackson by decision or Jackson by late submission would be my pick.
I hear you, Brett. I was hoping that you were going to go, full conspiracy theory and tell me that you were big on the dog here and going hard on that plus 350 money line. No, but I can give you a reason why pretty much any fighter will win. So I may sit on the fence this entire podcast, but there are paths to victory for every single fighter, and got to make sure we let the people know. So for those of you who may not know a lot about our guy, Brett Apley over here, he does mostly DFS content. So he has the same kind of brain I do, where everyone mocks me for the underdog picks and plays and the fact that I can pick a path to victory and argue for somebody who everybody absolutely hates and counts out. That's kind of the thing that he does as well, because especially with daily fantasy, which, by the way, I am god awful at. You if you just come to the conclusion that somebody who's mispriced can show up and pull the win, that's how you make those lineups, right? Like, you got to be able to find a couple underdogs that you can slip into your lineup that are going to be low owned. That's how you get the win. Am I wrong in that thought process? Because like I said, I'm bad.
No, you're not wrong. I mean, part of DraftKings is you got to be able to make a case for every fighter, because you got some underdog. Yeah, he might, Adashev might not have the greatest chance to win in the entire world, but if he's 10% owned and he's very, very cheap, now all of a sudden, if he does get a win and it's better than the 10% ownership that comes in a big tournament, now you have massive leverage against the field. But just generally speaking, pretty much in any fight that I'm going to analyze, even if it's a fighter who I absolutely love, I'm trying to figure out where they suck. I'm trying to figure out what holes do they have, because that's what's gonna keep me from betting Peter Yan at minus 500. It's those type of things that you have to be able, no matter who the fighter is, to understand their strengths and weaknesses to a degree. So even though I may sit on the fence at times, and I tend to be more on the side of favorites that I just pick straight out, you have to be able to figure out where fighters are weak, because otherwise you're going to miss things.
Absolutely. No, I love it. I think we're getting along just great, Brett. I love it. And as always, we appreciate you coming and spending your time here on the show. We got a couple fights to get through here to wrap this thing up, everybody. Joe Solecki taking on Alex de Silva. The curious case of Joe Solecki, Brett. This is a guy that I cannot seem to get right. It seems like right when I jump on board, that's when he drops the ball. Technically speaking, I actually thought he won the fight against Jared Gordon in his last fight. I thought he did enough to get it. It was a split. Yeah, you win some, you lose some. I can't complain too badly with my recent run of having splits go my way, so I'm not going to bitch about it. But I think he deserved the nod there. He averages 2.85 takedowns per 15 minutes with a 52% accuracy, so really active in the grappling. He's another one of these wrestlers, though, that doesn't mind taking bottom position. He's got a 50% takedown defense. So if you want to force the issue, he will go to the ground and play off of his back. Not the best for scoring in MMA. So unless you know you're going to get that sub, maybe a path to victory given to your opponent there, basically. But he's a very intelligent fighter, a very intelligent grappler. We saw him in the Gordon fight. He pulled his man away from the cage to make sure that he couldn't use the fence to reverse positions. I like the kid's brain. So big fan of Joe Solecki here. Alex de Silva, 21-3. Crazy, absolutely crazy level of experience for a 26-year-old fighter. He is explosive. This guy likes to kick from the outside, but he loads up on these big hooks to close the distance. One-at-a-time power shots for the most part, Brett. And that's something that I'm not a giant fan of. I used to love that one-hitter-quitter type swing for the fences thing when I first got started. I've kind of gotten away from it. You see these guys that swing for the fences one at a time, and when they're not clipping people and putting them out immediately, they just tend to lose decisions. So something I've kind of patched up in my game, puts me a little bit on edge about Alex de Silva in this kind of a spot. But what does give me a little bit of hope is the kid took 2 years off. He's the right age with a ton of experience. That a 2-year-long layoff, you would expect massive improvements if he's been doing the right things out of the cage. Obviously, I'm not 1,000% sure that he hasn't been off partying in Brazil for the last 2 years, but I would expect that he's probably been in the lab, and we can maybe expect to see a better version of him. He also has good timing on his level changes, very positionally sound grappling, position over submission style, but he's dangerous with those submission attempts when he does go for them. He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage here. He does average 2.75 takedowns per 15 minutes with a 43% accuracy, so relatively active with his grappling as well, but he has a 77% takedown defense. So he is much more solid in trying to keep the fight standing when his opponents are the ones that are shooting for those takedowns. I don't mind the look on the underdog here, Brett, if I'm being completely honest with you. We have got a line currently set. Of course, they moved it around on me. Joe Solecki is a minus 165 favorite. Alex De Silva is plus 145. I think this fight's going to be close. I do slightly favor Alex De Silva on the feet, even though, like I mentioned, he's kind of a pot-shoddy one-at-a-time striker. I still think he's maybe a little bit better than Joe Solecki is on the feet when it comes to the grappling. I tend to favor Joe Solecki just a little bit in this spot, but it's relatively close, except that takedown defense for Alex De Silva, I think, might be kind of the deciding factor here in this spot. And God forbid, if Alex De Silva gets on top of Joe Solecki, I don't know if Joe's getting back up. The way this guy has his shoulder pressure, the way he's heavy on top of him, I think if Alex De Silva gets on top, he'll grind away 5 minutes with no concerns. I don't know if Joe's given up a submission. He's never been tapped before in his professional MMA career, so I'm not expecting it to be the first time Saturday. But I think Alex can win minutes both on the ground and on the feet. It's kind of a dog or pass spot for me. How about you, Brett?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think from a macro perspective, these guys kind of match up very similarly for me in the sense that I really only want to trust Joe Solecki when he's on top of his opponent and controlling them. And even though Alex De Silva has a striking background and has some, has some skill on the feet, I kind of also only want to trust him when he's on top of his opponent too. Like that's where these guys are best. And Joe Solecki, yeah, watching him get taken down by Jim Miller in that first round and held down for the entirety of the first round really, really concerns me because what Alex De Silva has pretty much only done to this point in the UFC is wrestle. That's all he's really wanted to do. He was desperately wrestling against Yakovlev. He went out and landed, 3 takedowns in 3 rounds and dominated Kazula Vargas for 12 minutes. And then Brad Riddell, obviously he should have wrestled in that fight and he did, but he did so successfully. That's kind of who he is at this point. So I'm struggling in the sense that if this fight might just come down to who lands takedowns, because if the fight plays out on the feet, I guess I will favor Alex De Silva because I think he's just a more effective striker. I think he's a little bit more powerful. He's landed almost no strikes. I mean, he has barely put together even a round of pure striking, though. So for me to really trust him on the feet for 15 minutes, I don't know that it's wise. I think that probably he can beat Joe Solecki, who hasn't shown anything either on the feet for 15 minutes. I think he probably beat Joe Solecki, but De Silva's cardio late in fights kind of concerns me. So mostly I just expect these guys to be shooting on each other. I favor De Silva more early in the fight because I think he's a more physical presence than Solecki, and Solecki, his takedown defense hasn't looked spectacular. His bottom game hasn't looked spectacular. So I think it's pretty likely that De Silva can get on top of Solecki early. The problem is, do you think he can do that 3 rounds in a row? Because like you said, I don't know that he's going out there and submitting Solecki. Whereas if you watch De Silva shoot takedowns late in fights, like against Brad Riddell, they're really sloppy. I am not thrilled with this guy's cardio, and shooting sloppy takedowns on Brad Riddell is one thing, but you're shooting sloppy takedowns on an opponent like Solecki, who there's such an easy transition to the back there. I worry that De Silva's cardio is going to hurt him in this fight against an opponent who maybe is not fully processed, maybe he doesn't have the best control, but is a really good submission grappler. I really like Joe Solecki as a submission grappler. Mm-hmm. I've already seen De Silva tap out to a guillotine choke. It wouldn't be that surprising to me if he made a mistake, Solecki either took him down or just transitioned to top and submitted him. That outcome would not surprise me. But as the underdog, I definitely think De Silva's live. I think he could win minutes on the feet. I think he definitely could control Solecki. I think he can land takedowns. I'm not fully convinced that he will be able to do that for 3 rounds against a pretty quality opponent. So that's kind of something that I know he did against Kazula Vargas, but it's different levels in my opinion. So I think taking the shot on the underdog is fine.
Quality opponent.
What'd you say?
I don't know that Kazula Vargas is a quality opponent.
I would agree, and so that's why I'm hesitant to buy into that matchup fully. I don't see Joe Solecki getting grounded for 12 minutes. That would be pretty embarrassing. But De Silva's a good wrestler, and the fact that he was able to go out there and land 3 takedowns on Brad Riddell early, that I don't want to overlook that. I don't want to understate that, and I think it's a clear path to, if not De Silva winning, at least him winning the early portion of this fight. So I think it's going to be a good fight. It's a good test for both guys. If I had to pick a side, it would be on the underdog here, because I definitely think he does have paths to victory, especially early.
Okay. Yeah, I like it, Breck. I do think it's a dog or pass type of situation. And something that I've talked about a couple times is these guys that have serious upside, they take that first step up into the contender circle. They just dip their toe in against the elite of the division. I'm super high on Brad Riddell. He's somebody who I think of as being a contender in this division. And the fact that Alex De Silva went out there and went to war with that man for 15 minutes, he's going to come back better. You know what I mean? That's the kind of experience that you're going to go, oh, this is the level I need to be at. And that's when they take those leaps. So, yeah, I fully expect to see a new version of Alex De Silva come Saturday. It's a little bit, again, of kind of a blind faith leap to take him as the underdog here in this spot. So I'm not convinced that I'm going to. I don't think I'm going to make it to the betting window, but it's absolutely a dog or pass for me if it's going to be a bet.
Yeah, fair enough. And it's always hard because these guys, they should be making developments every time. That's what you should be doing if you're a legit professional fighter. If you're a legit contender, you should be coming off a loss, going back to the gym, figuring out what you did wrong, and working on it. And unfortunately, most guys don't do that. It's not
always the case.
we do not see improvements a lot of times. So it's always hard for me to be like, oh, that's why I'm picking fighter X or Y. But like, that's what should, and Solecki too. We should see improvements from these guys. And De Silva already has enough of a base where if he can make adjustments, work on his cardio a little bit, throw more volume, he's going to be a legitimate threat.
I agree, and I like it. And chasing big hits here, I would love to have De Silva at plus 180. That's a nice snipe to get that early in, because I would play it at plus 180, no problem. All right, everybody. We got a fight where, speaking of improvements, I don't know if we're going to be seeing any in this one. Felice Herrig taking on Karolina Kowalkiewicz. The rematch that we all were clamoring for. Brett, oh my God. So I guess y'all could say that my first ever true love in women's MMA was Felice Herrig. I fell in love with this girl on The Ultimate Fighter. She was awesome. She was fun, brought the attitude, owned everything that she came in with. And then she was plagued by injuries, and then she was just not that good.
Did she ever hair dyed red back in the day or something?
No, believe it or not. No, I just I don't know. Anytime you get these girls like Angie who like does the cosplay at the events and stuff like that. I love when they do that kind of thing and they just they own the look and they go for it. She was one of the ones that kind of caught my eye that way. Anyway, she did not turn out to be what I thought she was going to be. I envisioned her being far better. Now, I have a much sharper eye these days. But, back then I could not say that I was a good judge of talent. But she did not pan out the way I expected. Plus, you can't knock her too hard. She's coming off of an ACL surgery. She had a whole bunch of injuries laying her up. The one thing that you can count on with Felice Herrig is she is always in shape. This girl comes in, cut the hell up, man. She is extremely well muscled. If she can overpower her opponents, that's kind of her only path to victory. She's not out striking anybody. She's not really out grappling anybody. She just kind of physically mauls people. And I don't see why she can't do that here. Felice Herrig should have a strength advantage over Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Karolina coming off of a retirement. She's had a lot of scary fights recently in the UFC. I'm shocked that she even came back. I'm with SD Cruiser here. I think she's completely shot. I don't want to see Karolina fight again. There are certain fighters, Brett. There's only been a couple times that I've seen it happen in the octagon where you watch the fire just die in somebody's eyes. And we saw that with Karolina. It was ugly, man. Like, I know Felice is not the kind of fighter that you're expecting to be a knockout threat, so like maybe it's safe to put her in there with this one. But once you lose that confidence, once you lose that spark, it's gone for good. I cannot wait to fade Alexander Gustafsson when he comes back, because he's the other example I use when it comes to the fire dying in a fighter's eyes. I just don't think it's possible for you to regain that in your fighting career. You've got to take a massive step down, go to a regional scene organization to get right. And a lot of these guys keep coming back and fighting at the top level. Now, this is a step down for Karolina, but her weakness is that she accepts bottom position. She's never been the most physically imposing fighter. She's never been the strongest fighter. Hell, she doesn't even have good takedown defense. I think Felice probably just body locks her and drags her to the mat, man. I think this is going to be a sad, boring 15-minute fight, if I'm being completely honest. I'm not touching this thing. This is your official fireball and popcorn fight of the evening. Karolina Kowalkiewicz, a plus 100 even money. Underdog Felice Herrig, the minus 120 favorite. It's favored to pass. I'm picking Felice Herrig. She's coming off those injuries and the long layoff. There's no way in hell I can trust her with my money, but that's the pick for me.
I mean, the only thing is, why couldn't Felice Herrig take her down when they fought the first time, which was back in 2018, and Herrig went 0 for 5 on takedowns, and Karolina pulled guard and locked up a triangle and swept her into mount. Entering that fight, what you said is exactly what I thought was going to happen in that fight. And the fact that Herrig could not take her down, and I thought Karolina looked like the better grappler, has me concerned. Because, since that point, Karolina has obviously looked awful, and she got horribly injured by Yan Xiaonan, and she got submitted by Jessica Penne, and she got brutally knocked out by Jessica Andrade. But, I don't know, is that worse than actually losing to Karolina the first time, losing to Michelle Waterson, getting subbed by Verna, and then going on OnlyFans foot pick spree, which is what she's been doing on the sidelines for the last couple of years while she's had horrible knee surgeries? Herrig could absolutely do what you think she's going to do, but I guess there's just no reason for me to be that confident in it. And Karolina might be done, but what, the dying fire in a fighter's eyes, would she not get more rejuvenated fighting an opponent, the last person she beat?
This is her regional scene fight, is what you're saying.
Exactly. So the thing about that last fight is, despite Karolina looking like the better grappler to me, despite severely outlanding Felice, I think that was a split decision. And it was still largely competitive. So for Karolina to win, she's again going to have to defend takedowns. I don't think she's ever landed a takedown in her career. Has she? 0.19 per 15 minutes. So she's not really going to wrestle. She's going to have to defend takedowns. She's going to have to outvolume the shit out of Herrig and still probably only win a competitive decision. So it's not a fight that I'm very confident. What'd you say?
It'll still be a split.
It'll still probably be a split. And I will say, when I went back and watched that fight, Herrig did get close. She got close early on a takedown. It's just, I thought Karolina defended pretty well, and I thought when Karolina was on bottom and reverse position into mount, I just felt like they were on a similar level in terms of grappling. So I feel like the correct way to cap this fight is to make them close to even money. And there's too many aspects outside of the variables that I like to use, the statistics, where I don't know how her knees are holding up. I don't know what's going on in Karolina's mind. I definitely think Karolina could win this fight if she defends takedowns. She throws at a higher volume, way higher volume than Herrig. She's got so much more volume upside throughout her career. Herrig hurt her in the last round of that fight too. There's questions about Karolina's durability. So there's a lot of different outcomes here. I capped this fight close. I'm not touching it from a betting perspective. Herrig has more paths to victory, but based on the first fight, I don't think it's unfair at all to cap the fight even, or even favor Karolina, because her grappling defense looked good.
Yeah, and maybe this is me buying a little too much into the narrative, Brett. If you rewound this fight 2 years, right after, if we're imagining Felice Herrig did not go on her feet, pick spree, and she wasn't sidelined with injuries, and they just rebooked this fight then, Karolina would have looked like the much better fighter. She's probably a solid favorite at that point. So fast forward 2 years, we've seen her get her ass beat a bunch of times. Maybe we're buying too much into the narrative. Maybe Karolina simply is the better fighter in this spot. Again, it's super low level. There's massive questions around both women. The way that Karolina just got hurt after getting her face busted up the way she did, man, she looks scared to get hit to me. The last couple times when she took big punches, she shelled up in a way that did not give me any confidence whatsoever. I think that if Herrig gets on top of her and starts laying any type of ground and pound, I think she takes her bag and goes home. You know what I mean? And that's something that I'm like, I can go nowhere near a fighter who has that kind of fragility built into them at this stage of their career.
Yeah, and that's fine. And I think Karolina is going to look fine personally, but I don't see – it's not like Karolina has the upside of just, oh, my God, if Karolina lands that one big shot, Herrig's dead. And that's it. Karolina doesn't have that type of finishing ability where if Herrig actually does land a takedown, well, now would I be stunned if Karolina gets taps to an armbar? No, not really. So Herrig has more past the victory, has more finishing upside. And if you want to use that combination with the added narratives around Karolina, I think that's more than fair as an argument.
1-800 Gambler, Brett. We're calling the orderlies. We got Brady and Wheezy coming in after us if we bet on this fight. Everybody keep your money in your pockets unless you know something that we don't, because this is not one you need to get invested in. Like I said, I'm going to pick Herrig, but beyond that, not really going to have anything invested moving forward on that fight. Next up, we're going from the little littles to the big bigs, man. Alonzo Menifield taking our Askar Mozharov. And this is going to be an absolute car crash, my guy. Like you know what? Brett, I'm not even convinced that Alonzo Menifield is supposed to be on the UFC roster. I'm not even really convinced that this guy is UFC caliber, but they know how to matchmake him. He is their freak show fighter, and they put him in fun fights with other freak show fighters, and you can almost always expect something crazy to happen in an Alonzo Menifield fight. Somebody's dying on Saturday. Have you guys seen Askar No Mercy? Like, this man has nuclear missiles in his hands. If he connects with anybody, they are going down. But he's 25-7. So he is not somebody that we can just assume is going to roll through his opponent here in the UFC making his debut. Alonzo Menifield, 2 wins and 3 losses in his last 5. One of those wins, extremely suspect. I thought he won the fight against Will Knight, and I had a bet on Will Knight that night. You know what? I feel like he's been scraping the bottom of the barrel in the UFC. His wins have come over Ed Herman, Fabio Cherant, and Vinicius Moreira. I mean, the only win that he's got that even looks anywhere close to aging well is that Paul Craig victory. And personally, I don't think that was the same Paul Craig, and he made the horrific mistake of throwing the same exact spinning back fist 4 times in a row. So massive lapse in fight IQ from Paul Craig to lose that fight. Man, I don't want anything to do with this fight from a betting perspective. Askar is a plus 135 underdog. Alonzo Menifield is plus 155, a minus 155 favorite. I guess it makes sense to make the guy with UFC caliber experience the favorite in this spot, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if he gets dusted by Askar when they get into an early striking exchange. I want to see the face-offs, Brett. I want to see what these two monsters look like next to each other and see who's actually the bigger man. It wouldn't shock me, call me crazy, it wouldn't shock me if we saw Alonzo pull out the old grappling skills for this one. Believe it or not, he's got some underrated grappling chops. And the night that he won by submission, basically MMA betting Twitter erupted because, of course, everybody expected him to get a submission victory via Von Flue choke over Fabio Cherant. Man, I wouldn't be surprised if he is able to weather the early storm. He's not a gas guy himself. So, again, not a guy I can count on to drag the fight late. But I don't know what Askar looks like late either, unless I'm mistaken. He's been submitted in round 2, I think, more than so. This is a crazy fight, man. Super super low level, not a good read on this one. He tends to force early finishes. He's either knocking people out in round one or he's losing the fight himself shortly thereafter. So I don't know, man.
I can't interest you in the all 6.1 units on minus 610 fight ends inside the distance here. Is that what you're saying?
That's more the move we're talking about, man. I don't want to pick a side, lay the wood on the violence bet. I like that far more than picking a fighter.
I don't think Menifield is that good, and I can totally understand why he's the favorite here, and I can totally picture him winning because Movsar is the type of fighter who is kill or be killed. We've seen him. I mean, he was tapping out to strikes on the ground. And it's probably stupid of me to think this way because I'm getting 20-second clips against the guy from the soda stand where he's just knocking him out instantly. But I think Movsar is a better striker than Menifield. I think Movsar is actually legitimately a dangerous striker for those 30 seconds to 60 seconds that we get from him, and especially the lower leg kicks. I don't know for sure that he's going to throw them against Menifield, but in every fight of Movsar's that I've seen, he is bombing away low leg kicks instantly, and he looks fast,
hard,
very hard, to the point that people are like crippled 10 seconds into the fight. And Menifield is not a sure-footed guy. He is not fleet of foot. He just kind of stands there. And if I'm Movsar, I'm going out and I'm kicking that dude's leg immediately. And so people are talking about, Menifield's going to look great in rounds 2 and 3 if this fight gets there. Like, is Menifield going to be able to stand after 5 minutes? I really don't know. And
has he ever looked great in rounds 2 or 3?
Not really, no. Conceptually, I get it because Movsar, if he does, let's say he doesn't win by first round KO, he's probably just losing the fight. Menifield's probably just the more consistent striker, more experienced, better cardio, better than zero cardio, which Movsar probably has. Probably a better wrestler. Movsar doesn't look good on the ground. Quite frankly, though, if I'm Menifield, and you mentioned it, if I'm Menifield, I'm wrestling right out of the gate here. I do not necessarily believe this is a 50-50 who's going to land the big shot first type of striking exchange. I think Movsar is better. I think Movsar is more dangerous. I'm not high in William Knight at all. Knight hurt Menifield very badly. OSP knocked him out. Is it stupid of me to bet Movsar outright at plus 140 or whatever he is? Probably, but like I legitimately think he has a good chance to win this fight by knockout early, even if that's his only shot. Like, this is not a puncher's chance to me. I think he's aggressive. He's going to come after Menifield early. You cannot underestimate those leg kicks. Like, that gives you so much win equity. Any fighter who uses low leg kicks, you're adding win equity to your plate. And unfortunately, Movsar's got only one thing on his plate and nothing else, which is a problem, and he's going to get exposed for it. This is going to be a fantastic fight. And if you're on the Menifield side, I get it. Like, in the long run, you're probably going to win those type of bets by playing against an opponent who has no cardio, who probably has no wrestling. But I don't know. I would be very concerned. I'm very concerned for Menifield early in this spot. And it could be another one of those blood diamond situations where I'm like, yo, this blood diamond guy is probably a legit striker. Hey, the first 30 seconds here, watch out. And he just gets immediately taken down and subbed. And you're like, well, that's good job to Jeremiah Wells. That's what you should have done. So if Menifield's smart, it's probably what he will do. I'm not necessarily out here betting on Menifield's IQ or cardio, though. So it's going to be a great fight. And Movsar's, we know he's limited, but yeah, ultimately, I really do believe he has early knockout upside here.
I like it. I mean, I don't mind steering into the car crash here, Brett. I really don't. I think that he's got a lot of KO upside, like you mentioned, and I don't trust Alonzo Menifield past the 7-minute mark. I just don't. So if you're going to take that kind of a shot on a guy that, even if he comes out and wrestles right away, if he doesn't get that round 1 sub, he falls off a cliff in round 2. I don't know that I trust the new kid in round 2 at this point, but I know that Alonzo Menifield ain't going to do shit if we get into the second round. So maybe a live bet spot, man. If Alonzo Menifield survives round 1 and Askar looks like he's at all got gas left in him, maybe I'll jump in live at that point and try and fade Menifield, because I prefer to be against Menifield rather than on him, personally speaking. I just also don't really know that I can trust this debutant until I see him at the UFC level. So we'll see what happens, but I'm kind of with you.
Yeah, and I will say, though, if you go out there and see Menifield shooting takedowns early and landing them, even if they do get past the first round, then I would be backing away, because if Menifield's smart enough to go out there and wrestle early and he can have success doing it, he could probably just do it for 15 minutes. So, but we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
It's gonna be fun, man. I'm looking forward to that one just because we get, like I said, it's my favorite freak show fight on the card. That one's going to be highly entertaining as long as it lasts, and another good note-taking opportunity. All right, everybody, we got 184 live viewers, and I'm sad to say I'm a little disappointed in you guys. We've only got 81 likes on the video. Come on now. There's 100 of you that aren't smashing the like button for me. Do me a favor, hit that like. We got Brett Epley on the show. What more do you want? Let's go.
We're going to go on 3 hours here, guys. Come on.
Right? Jeez. All right, we're trying to move it along so it's not that long of a show for you. But anyway, Poliana Botelho taking on Karolina Silva. This fight, Brett, is one that I wanted to stay clear away from. The second I saw this fight on the card, I was like, nope, not going to do it. And then I did my due diligence, and I dug in, and I looked at the line, and this fight is the perfect spot for the Dana White Contender Series fade, Brett. I don't know if you know exactly the angle, and people seem to confuse this, so I will go over it yet again. My Dana White Contender Series fade angle is not simply bet on a Dana White Contender Series debutant. It's not that simple. They have to be debuting over somebody with UFC experience, and the experienced fighter has to be the underdog. If they're debuting against the UFC experienced fighter and that person is the favorite, that is not the angle. The Contender Series fighter must be favored. And that's what we have here in this spot. It's close, which almost got me on the pass, but close is only horseshoes and hand grenades. Karolina Silva is a minus 120 favorite. Poliana Botelho is a plus 100 underdog. And the fade demands that I make this bet, Brett. I have bet on Poliana Botelho. It doesn't feel good. And some people on Twitter even hit me with the old friends don't let friends bet on Poliana Botelho. And I was like, I know, guys. I know. Trust me. I get it. Poliana Botelho is 8-4. She does have sharp hands. I like her boxing. She's pretty heavy on her feet, though. She kind of plods forward towards her opponents. She's working on her grappling. That's been kind of the hole in her game, and that's why a lot of people are looking at Karolina Silva as being kind of the underrated lock on the card here. Poliana Botelho has a hard time getting up off her back. But she's got an 80% takedown defense, Brett. I think that's something that people are overlooking. Even though she doesn't look spectacular on the ground, she is hard to get there in the first place. And if you go back and you watch Karolina Silva's Dana White Contender Series fight, holy crap. I don't know what people are writing home about, Brett. She has a lot of kicks from the outside. She likes to deep to the face. Those are not strikes that are going to be a problem for Poliana Botelho to handle. And honestly, she's willing to play off her back. She's willing to go down to the ground and give up those minutes looking for subs off of her back. I'm not expecting Poliana to come out with a wrestling game plan here in this spot. She was losing. Silva was losing her Dana White Contender Series fight until her opponent gassed out, stuck her neck out, and she jumped the gilly. She caught a lucky guillotine in that fight. Now she gets signed to the UFC, and she's favored over Poliana Botelho. Why, Brett? Why? What did she show us in the Dana White Contender Series fight that should make her favored in this spot? She's hit Poliana Botelho? Absolutely. 1,000%. Absolutely. But what did she do on the feet? that lets you think that she's going to win minutes in this fight? I saw nothing. What did she show you in the wrestling department that makes you think she can get this fight to the ground? I saw nothing. Poliana Botelho is a decent striker on the feet. She's got 80% takedown defense. If she makes a stupid mistake and goes to the ground, she can get subbed. If that doesn't happen, I don't understand why she's the dog, Brett. I got 2 units at even money plus 100. Poliana Botelho.
Yeah, I don't mind it.
For the record, I'm uncomfortable.
I think you should. I think it, and to answer your question directly, it speaks to the perception of Poliana Botelho because people just don't think she's very good, and that's why she's the underdog here. One thing that I thought was hilarious about Silva's record is that her first 10 fights, she won 8 of them. All 8 fighters she beat had 0 wins when she beat them, and the 2 fighters in her first 10 fights who had more than 0 wins, she lost to both of them. So you have to throw her record completely out the window anyway. And my perception of Silva is that she is a somewhat a physical fighter, again, who's going to have success early. I like some of what I see from her wrestling, to be honest. I am getting music in my head from the topology. Apologize. I like some of what I see from Silva's wrestling. I think she's got some level of ability on the feet. I have questions about Botelho's defensive wrestling and grappling. I have questions about Botelho's volume, etc. But the Contender Series fight for Silva, what I saw was a fighter who's just completely flawed despite having perhaps some physical potential. She's a fighter who got taken down early and was held down for 4 minutes in the first round. And I hate when fighters do that. You cannot win consistently at a high level if you're playing off your back. And shockingly, she lost that round. And what did she do immediately into round 2? First of all, she looked exhausted and she jumped on a guillotine choke and got it. And I think if she didn't get the guillotine choke there, she loses the round. She probably gets finished and just loses the fight as a whole. So I do like some of what I see from Silva in terms of her raw ability. And I think she could get Botelho down. I think she could hurt her with a strike, for example. But there is absolutely no way that I would be able to trust Silva to win a decision here. I think if she could, it would be her just laying on Botelho for 15 minutes. I am really, really concerned about Silva's cardio to the point that, like, I think it's either it's like a major liability or it's an extreme liability to the point that Botelho might just finish her. Like I could be wrong because we don't have a ton of tape and I want to see more. And Botelho's not great, but I really think Botelho winning inside the distance is live here because I thought Silva looked completely gassed after about 6 minutes in that first fight. And if the fight plays out on the feet for 15 minutes for that reason, I would favor Botelho because she actually has experience going the distance. And I mean, God, she lands 2.8 significant strikes per minute, which is very, very poor, but she's at least going to be alive in round 3, which I favor in my strikers. I actually think Botelho probably should wrestle with her too, because it's going to give her another path to victory. It's going to tire Silva out. If she gets submitted, maybe she shouldn't because she might get submitted from full guard. But I hate when my fighters can wrestle and can hold their opponents down and they don't because they're afraid of a bottom guard game. You have to be able to defend arm bars from guard at the UFC level. I don't like. It all comes down to defense. Winning by submission from your back is much more a mistake from the top player than some elite maneuver from the bottom player. And so anyone who understands armbar triangle defense should be fine. And you would think that they would train that over and over and over and over again. And maybe Botelho is just not good as a grappler and won't go to that path. But even after all the flaws I've already talked about with Silva, I don't love her defensive wrestling, and I think she's going to continue to get out-wrestled. So it wouldn't shock me if Silva had success early in this fight. It wouldn't shock me if Silva landed a takedown and locked up a submission. I think that's very possible. It wouldn't shock me if she landed a takedown, held Botelho down for a while. Maybe squeaks out a second round with just some improved cardio or something we haven't seen. But I'm picking Botelho here because I really am scared of the gas tank. I like her process more than Silva, and that's about it. It's a low-level women's fight, but you put on the tin hat. Yeah, I don't hate a Botelho inside the distance sprinkle there.
So what you're telling me, one of my favorite things to do is target these bad gas tank fighters. Are we looking at another round 3 TKO spot? Is that what we're doing this weekend?
I could see it. I mean, I could see, the only thing is I could see a second round TKO. I could see you're probably much better at spotting the exact precise round plus finish combinations than I am. But hey, if we get to round 3, I expect Silva to kind of be, wobbling around, and I could see it.
I like fading bad gas tanks, man. And honestly, one of the things about Botelho is she did go a full 15 minutes with my girl Jillian Robertson. Everybody thinking she's just going to get taken down and subbed by this girl Silva. I go, guys, one does not simply survive a 15-minute wrestling match with Jillian Robertson. Like, that shows that she knows what she's doing defensively speaking, at least somewhat, that she was able to go a full 15 minutes with Jillian, because Jillian chokes pretty much everybody out that she's got an advantage over. I had one guy. Now, you know what? I'm going to give you my favorite meme here real quick, Brett. Okay. So I had a guy online, though, that was talking about betting Silva and betting her big and was like, bro, she got choked out by Cynthia Calvillo. And I was like, why are we comparing this girl to Cynthia Calvillo?
I was huge on Calvillo in that spot too. Like, Cynthia Calvillo is very, very good at a couple specific, maybe not anymore, but like if you told me, and if you told me Silva had the back here for 10 minutes of time, I'd be concerned, but I don't think she's on the level of Calvillo or on the level of Jillian Robertson. And again, that still could mean she could block up a damn guillotine 30 seconds into this fight. But outside of an early big moment, dominant performance, you got to be real concerned about how Silva's going to look.
Completely agree. And I'm sorry, I had to laugh, but I was like, this girl is nothing even close to Cynthia Calvillo, especially at that point in her career. Like, I'm not looking at losing a rear naked choke to somebody who's got those kind of wrestling chops and that kind of physicality that I'm like, boy, that's a stretch. So yeah, man, gotta prove it to me. Maybe Silva pulls the what was it? Tatiana Suarez, who came in, who had the just god awful real scene record, and then looked like $1 million. Her UFC debut tricked us all. Maybe she pulls one of those moves, and she's just finally turned that corner, and we've never seen it. But you got to show me. I'm loading up. Dana White Contender Series fade in full effect. Round 3 sprinkle coming, baby. Let's go. I'm on it. Pauliano Botelho inside the distance. So be it. Everybody get praying.
I love it.
All right, man. Next fight up, Mike Trizano taking on Lucas Almeida. And Brett, this should be a banger. This fight absolutely should be just a fun ride from start to finish. I know a lot of people aren't super high on Mike Trizano, but the fact is he's a Hurricane Shane type, man. He's in shape. He's durable. He's mean. Maybe he's not quite what I expected him to be. I actually had really high hopes for Mike Trizano. He's young. He could get there. He's not necessarily dead in the water or anything like that, but he's not quite improving at the rate that I expected him to. Dude is not afraid of a war, and he's just tough as fuck. Like, that toughness will close the gap for Mike Trizano in certain situations. Lucas Almeida 13-1. He lost a Dana White Contender Series fight. Now he's getting the call up after getting a regional win under his belt. This guy is slow and plodding, extremely heavy on his feet the way he walks his opponents down. And he swings with bad intentions, dude. Big winging power hooks, 100% finish rate, and he's dangerous late. A lot of times we see these fighters who are dangerous early, who have these 100% finish rates, and they just can't quite hack it when you get to the UFC level. But this guy is one of those. He's got several round 2, round 3 knockouts. He's even got one in round 5. So the fact that he's that dangerous that late in the fight gives me some hope that he's not like a round 1 flash in the pan type of fighter. But I'm never counting on somebody to finish against a guy like Mike Trizano. The way Trizano tanks damage and just keeps coming forward, I think he's always going to be able to make fights close and tight and interesting. Trizano's a minus 240 favorite. Lucas Almeida is a plus 200 dog. Kind of a favorite or pass spot for me, I think, simply because I've got a lot to learn about Lucas Almeida, I think. And Mike Trizano is a guy, again, who I feel like eventually is going to better and turn that corner. He's just not quite there yet. What do you think on this one, Brett? This one it's got me in my head a little bit. Like, I think Mike Trizano wins, but I'm not confident enough to parlay him up or anything at minus 250.
No, there's no way that I would be touching Trizano in this spot, quite honestly. I am not the biggest Trizano guy. I really don't like his passivity in fights. I mean, he's averaging 3.54 significant strikes landed per minute, absorbing 3.9. I hate negative ratios. Strikes defending 48%. Doesn't really wrestle, averages less than half a takedown per 15 minutes. His wins in the UFC, I mean, a split decision over Giannetti, split over Pena, and that questionable decision over Ludovic Klein. I do think you can favor Trizano here for the experience, the fact that he's literally won a decision before in his career, where Almeida has not. I think Trizano is a tough guy. I think he's got good cardio, but I think Almeida is decent while he can last. And I guess the obvious comeback to that is, well, he's not going to last very long. So therefore he should be a sizable underdog here. I think that's fine. But like, just as an example, in that Contender Series fight, which he won round 1 and then lost rounds 2 and 3, he landed 52 significant strikes in the first round, attempted 95 significant strikes in the first round. And like, I don't care who you are. If you have someone pressuring you like Almeida does, very aggressive, spamming combinations, attempting volume at that high of a rate, it's a problem. And I would probably favor Almeida to win the first round outright here. Like, I think that's very, very likely because that's what he always does throughout his career. A lot of them turn into finishes, but he's super aggressive, throws a ton of volume, and Trizano kind of just stands there. He doesn't really do that much. Technically, he's fine. He's an okay technical striker and an okay technical grappler. He just doesn't, I mean, we just saw him get horribly outpaced by Hakeem Dawodu. And Dawodu is a very good striker himself too, but it's like Trizano didn't attempt a takedown for the first 10 minutes of that fight. And then he did in round 3, got Dawodu down. Dawodu got back up, and then he's like, okay, I'm done wrestling. Like, the negative to what I see in Almeida's game is besides the cardio issue, he gives up way too many clinch entries. It's not that his takedown defense is horrible, but he can't separate enough. And especially as you're pressuring, your opponents are like often going to counter with clinching and grappling. And he just allows too many entries for me to be comfortable with that. So a good opponent will counter and clinch with Almeida, will counter, clinch, and grapple with Almeida. They'll be able to have success on top. That'll slow him down, and then you're neutralizing him in round 1, winning round 2 and 3. That's what Trizano should do. Will he do it? I don't know, because he never has. He isn't really a wrestler. He doesn't attempt takedowns at a high pace. I'm mostly worried that he's going to try and strike with Almeida, and if he does, I think he's probably going to get out-volumed for as long as Almeida has the cardio. And the thing is, even Almeida, even though he lost rounds 2 and 3 in that fight against whatever his name was, Zell Huber, he still landed 21 and 23 significant strikes. That's like a great day for Trizano. If he can get 20 strikes in a round, he's like patting himself on the back as he loses the decision. I think for the way the betting line is set up, I wouldn't hate a shot on Almeida. I wouldn't hate a live betting opportunity on Trizano, because my expectation is that Almeida, first of all, Almeida pretty much only wins early. So if you're passing on a pre-bet on Trizano, you're getting that out of the way probably. Almeida's probably going to look his best in round 1. I think there's a pretty good chance the betting line comes down from minus 240 or whatever it is currently after round 1, and now you got a fighter who should have clear advantages in the second half of the fight. So if you're going to be on Trezano, I would much prefer a live betting spot rather than a pre-betting spot at the current price. But I do think if Almeida gets the fight he wants, which is standing and trading at range, that he can have success for a little while.
I don't mind that look at all, Brett. And honestly, this is a spot where I would love to buy low on Mike Trezano. The problem is there's no buying low on a minus 250 price tag. Like if they disrespected him here and lined this thing at a pick'em, or he was a minus 130 or something like that, I'd be all over Mike Trezano. Like you said, I think maybe a good live betting spot. We'll keep an eye out on that live betting market and see if we can jump in on him, because I do think he can potentially take this fight over the longer it goes. God, I just hope he grapples. If he gets out there and he wrestles, he really could pay off that high price tag. But unless he actually pulls that move, and I'm not his coach, I'm not in his corner, we talk about that all the time, where we aren't in these fighters' heads. They come out with the right game plan, they can look fabulous, and I don't know that Mike Trezano, we can trust him to do that. He's been hanging out with Hurricane Shane a little too much and wants to bang, except he doesn't have the volume that Shane does. So, yeah, I see it, Brett. I'm with you, man. I'm going to say Trezano, but I have zero confidence in that pick whatsoever, and I'm most likely not going to be betting it unless I get a good feel for it live.
Cool.
All right. Here we go, everybody. We're down to the nitty-gritty. We got 200 lives. Thank you all so much for joining with us and hanging out here today. Smash that like button for me. Remember, the show is brought to you by Pub Sports Radio and Superbook Sports. Give my guy Brett Apley a follow on Twitter. He's over at the Mayo Media Network, one of my favorite outlets for other, betting content and stuff like that, especially the DFS stuff that they pull over there. Big fight coming up next, Brett. Dan 50K Ige taking on Movsar Evloev. And I have been waiting, Dan. I've been waiting for the day that Movsar Evloev finally stuck his name in the contender circle. We knew it was coming. All of us, anybody who's seen this kid fight, knew that Movsar Evloev was eventually going to be cracking that top 10, that top 5, potentially even challenging for a title, and here we are. The question is he worth the price tag? Because he is a minus 380 favorite right now over Dan Ige, who is a plus 320. Dan Ige, a guy who is routinely disrespected by the books. He's 2-3 in his last 5. So I guess maybe it's something that you would say is justified, but those losses went against guys like Calvin Kattar, Chan Sung Jung, Josh Emmett, like other top 5-ish type of fighters, other challengers for the strap type of fighters. He came out and shut me the hell up against Gavin Tucker with a round 1 knockout. I'm still not exactly sure what the hell happened there, Brett. That was the one outcome that I really just never saw happening in that fight. This is going to be a fun one. Movsar Evloev, we know him for his wrestling. We know him for his crazy conditioning, cardio, his pace, his wrestling, his wrestling. But he's actually a pretty solid boxer. If you go back and watch the striking exchanges, he's got good range management. He's got good distance control. He knows how to work his jab. Underrated striking. I think he's extremely well-rounded, very physically strong. He's another one of these guys that can back. He hunts that back. He's got a strong body lock on him. He rides his opponent. 71%, I think, takedown defense rating. Unfortunately, apparently I lost my mind when I was taking my notes here on the stats. Let me check that. I just wrote 70. Who knows what the hell the 71 is? Yeah, that's his takedown defense rating. He averages 4 takedowns per 15 minutes, 47% accuracy. So if this guy wants it to the mat, it's getting to the mat. And he's a Khabib-esque chain grappler. Dan Ige, 55% takedown defense rating, Brett. That's the biggest concern here for me, is that he's not a guy that can routinely stop the takedowns. If you're going to give up takedowns that often, going against the guy that chain wrestles the way that Movsar does, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I think Dan Ige is a warrior. He's got high volume. He's got a good pace. He hits hard. We saw that knockout that he just pulled out a couple of fights ago, so he can put people away if he needs to. But I don't know that he can do that to a fighter the caliber of Movsar Evloev. I think this line is a little bit disrespectful, Brett, but at the end of the day, I'm on Movsar, and I think he's the deserving favorite.
I think the line's fine. I love Evloev. Even before he came into the UFC, I was looking at the debut breakdown I wrote on him, and I thought he had like title contender potential. I just love his grappling, and that's kind of the style that I tend to invest in and tend to back the most. The aggressive, technical, quality grappling. I mean, go back and watch the first sequence with him against Hakeem Dawodu in his last fight, and it's right out of the gate, and he's grabbing the head outside single, running the pipe, lifting, running the pipe again, transition to an inside trip, Dawodu scrambling up, and Evloev's running through a double leg, transitioning to the back, pulling Dawodu out into the center of the octagon, the body lock, slamming him to the ground. This is all happening so fast to the point that it's hard to even like explain what's happening unless you're writing down every step of the way. Point being, Evloev is a damn good wrestler, a really, really high quality wrestler who will go after it. The combination of the technique and the aggression is just going to be too difficult for most opponents to stop, especially against an opponent like Dan Ige, who we just saw the evidence. We just saw the evidence against Korean Zombie, and I think Korean Zombie's a great fighter too, but Zombie got him down very, very easily, took his back multiple times, controlled him for many, many minutes, 10 minutes in that fight. Didn't get the finish, but a finish seemed like it was on the horizon. I'm positive that Evloev has a lot of wrestling upside in this fight. Now, the couple concerns I have with Evloev, I guess, just revolve around any time he's not on top of his opponent. Like, I do actually think he has good boxing, and if he only boxed with Ige, I actually think he could still win that fight, but he could also lose that fight. I mean, he could get hurt. We saw him, and I was going to bring this up when you mentioned it. I forget who we were talking about earlier on the card. Evloev sometimes plays around. Like in that third round against Dawodu, he wanted to test out his striking. I'm pretty confident. It wasn't a fact that he no longer could take Dawodu down, and in fact, he actually did take Dawodu down later in that round. He wanted to test out his striking, and he got hurt. And Ige is too dangerous for me to be that confident. If Evloev is boxing at range, wants to play around, wants to test his striking, sure, Ige could hurt him. Ige could win a round. I think that's very possible. Mm-hmm. I also worry a little bit about the cardio. I think Evloev kind of says he can go a hard 3 rounds and he can go a hard 5 rounds, and cardio's not an issue for him. I don't buy it 100%. Like, I think it's possible that we could still see him having some trouble late in fights. So, like, in a scenario where Evloev dominates the first 2 rounds on the ground again and is going out there looking to strike in round 3 again, I could see these moments popping up for him, whether it's against Ige or against better competition. Like I said, I think this betting line's fine. I think there could still be value on Evloev, and I don't know if you want to talk about the decision prop, but he's pretty much a decision-based fighter. I like betting.
Tough guy to finish.
I like betting on fighters to win by decision. That I've had a lot of success doing that, and I think the most likely outcome of this fight is Evloev wins a decision. I don't know how you could think that any other outcome is more likely. It's around -150 or so that's not like the most spectacular line in the world. But if you're looking for a way to get off Evloev at his current betting line, I think betting him by decision is the obvious play. He could finish Ige. I wouldn't project it. Ige's very tough. Ige's I think a black belt in jiu-jitsu himself, very skilled on the ground, should survive. But if we're projecting Evloev to be in top position for 12 minutes, things can happen. Like I said, I really like Evloev. I think as he gets to the pure elites of this division, just as I said with Jeff Molina, I'm worried a little bit about the physicality. I don't know that he has the physicality and the athleticism to just dominate every single opponent in this division. But against Dan Ige, he should be able to land takedowns. He should be able to earn control. And God forbid, should this fight play out at range for a handful of minutes, he throws enough volume to the point where he should be able to survive. And it basically comes down to, does Ige hurt him and knock him out at some point? It's possible. Anything can happen, but I favor Evloev pretty sizably in this matchup.
I hear you, man. I agree. I wanted to make an underdog opportunity for Ige. I wanted to make a case for the dog. And of course, he's got pads. He could win this fight. It's a fist fight. Anything could happen. Maybe Evloev's not the guy we thought. Maybe in round 3, he does eventually slow down and gas out, and someone like Ige can take advantage of it. But I think Ige is going to have a real tough time finding him. And I think Ige is going to have his hands full for at least 12 minutes, fending off those takedowns. And I just think it'll be too late. Like, maybe even if the tide does turn, I think it's one of those ones where we see the young gun squeeze by and everyone goes, whoa, but he manages to make it to the scorecards and gets the win. Yeah, I think Evloev is probably the side here. Definitely favor him. Definitely think he's going to be somebody that I'll try to get a piece of. The price tag is a little bit steep, so it's going to be tough to find a way to actually get in betting him. But I think you hit a good spot there on that decision prop. Even laying a little bit of chalk on that doesn't seem bad, simply because he's not much of a finisher, and Ige is incredibly tough to finish. So I'm with you. I think it's Evloev, and I think Evloev by decision has a lot of merit to it.
For sure. And the last point I'll make is, even though I am concerned about the occasional big moments for Evloev in the future, him getting hurt or whatever, man, that submission that he was in against Mike Grundy, that he toughed out, like that spot really like, you want to talk about, there's toughness where you absorb 10 strikes per minute but survive, and then there's toughness where you're in a deep choke that if you don't do the exact correct things in that moment, you're going unconscious. And the fact that he did know what to do, survived, pushed through it, destroyed Grundy after, it gave me a lot of confidence in Evloev's toughness and ability to fight through adversity should moments come up in the future.
That kind of toughness and grit is something you can't teach. That's the kind of thing that's the kind of fighter I want to put my money on. Somebody who will do that, fight through that kind of a bad moment to get the win. Grundy's got a hell of a squeeze on him, so very impressive. That's anytime I run the tape back and I watch that fight, man, that's one of those ones I still can't figure it out. I'm like, how did he survive that? I still just don't know.
Slippery.
Yeah, kid's good. Anyway, this one should be fun. I'm very excited to see if he can pull it off. I expect him to. I think he's the goods, and definitely another favorite spot here for me. Next fight up, last fight on the card, your main event of the evening, Alexander Drago Volkov taking on Jairzinho Biggie Boy Rozenstruik. And I know everyone is fully expecting me to go back to the well, pull out my undefeated 7-unit bet. That's right. Anytime I unload the 7-unit bet, that's my 10-unit max. That's my version of it, is the 7-unit bet. Not doing it this week, Brett. Not doing it this week. Volkov's my guy. I love Volkov. He's kind of my dark horse of the division. His kickboxing is fantastic. He fights long. He knows how to use his reach. He's good with his kicks. We've seen that gas tank. I always go back to the Blades fight where he was wearing blades out, like defending those takedowns for 25 minutes. This man belongs in 25-minute main event slots because he can outpace his opponents. That's something that I think favors him drastically. However, Brett, we have seen him get clipped and hurt more than once. And we have seen a couple of instances, the one most notably where he dropped his guard in the final 10 seconds of the fight against Derek Lewis and got put out cold by a single big punch. The guy can be had, and that's kind of my problem with Alexander Volkov. He's got a 57% striking accuracy, but only a 53% defense. So he does get hit a decent bit. And Biggie Boy is the kind of guy that has that death touch, literally just needs one shot to get it done. And the Alistair Overeem fight comes to mind where I had Alistair Overeem that night, Brett. I had him big. And the final closing minutes of the 5th and final round, Biggie Boy decided he had had enough and finally went forward, and that was all it took. A single punch exploded the face of Alistair Overeem. That's the kind of power I don't like stepping in front of. Guys, I'm going to be listening extremely closely to the fighter interviews this week because the one thing I've figured out about Biggie Boy is if you get angry, chip on his shoulder, Biggie Boy, he's killing somebody. When he came out against Augusto Sakai, Everyone was talking about how bad he sucked and how he wasn't a contender and he needed to prove the haters wrong, prove the doubters wrong, and he blew that boy up. I know Augusto Sakai is not the level of someone like Gane or Volkov or anything like that, but it's his attitude. If he comes in and he's kind of buddy-buddy with his opponent and he's kind of chill and he's real zenned out, he's going to have a long, drawn-out kickboxing match, and he's going to look for that one shot. If he's coming in upset, if he's angry, if he's got the chip, then he's going to go forward. And when he goes forward, he kills people. So I'm going to be listening very closely to the interviews on Biggie Boy. I am tempted on the dog here, Brett. I think that Volkov more than likely wins minutes. But like I said before, the man gets into these exchanges where you can touch him back. And I think if Biggie Boy touches him, he goes to sleep. So lean to the dog on this one, looking for a reason to bet Biggie Boy, even though it pains me a little bit with how often I've made money backing Alexander Volkov. How about you, Brett? How do you see this main event playing out?
I'm on Volkov here. I totally understand conceptually that if Rozenstruik lands a big shot, it could knock Volkov out, but I just think that's literally the only chance he has of winning. And it's the type of spot that I'm always going to bet historically, and I'm wrong a lot. So it's not like, oh, I'm betting it, therefore the result's going to happen in my favor. But over the long run, betting on fighters who consistently win rounds versus fighters who never win rounds is usually a profitable outcome, especially at a betting line of around -150, which is, I think, very reasonable. And I think if we hadn't gotten that Tom Aspinall fight, I think Volkov would be a much bigger favorite. I think people are really scared off him, and it's just Rozenstruik's numbers are just so bad. I mean, he's averaging 2.8 significant strikes landed per minute, 45% striking defense. I mean, you talked about 53% for Volkov. Rozenstruik's got horrible striking defense. And unlike the last two matchups where Volkov looked a little shaky, perhaps, even in his win against Tybura, I mean, Tybura is out there shooting 16 takedowns. That's 5 per round against Volkov that he had to go out there and think about and defend. And Rozenstruik ain't going to wrestle. Rozenstruik's going to stand there, throw one big shot every couple minutes and hope that he wins by knockout. And sometimes he does because he has that much power. But, like, I just don't think it's 40 to 50% implied is correct for Rozenstruik to win by knockout here. I really don't. I think the public just vastly overrates fighters' chances to win by knockout at in high-level UFC fights. And yes, Volkov has been knocked out twice or once, but I mean, he's been knocked down in 2 of 37 rounds in the UFC. So it's like, does that mean Rozenstruik's going to get him 50% of the time? No. And granted, that's not a direct percentage. I think Rozenstruik's landed a knockdown in maybe 28% of his rounds or something like that. So he definitely can knock Volkov out here, but I feel like it's a 2 times out of 10, 3 times out of 10 type outcome rather than 5, 6, 7 times out of 10 for Rozenstruik. The problem is if I'm wrong, or if the outcome doesn't work out in my favor, it's probably gonna be Rozenstruik boinking him 30 seconds into the fight, and it'll be like, Brett, you're an idiot. That's the only outcome that could have ever possibly happened.
10 times, Brett. Every time. That's how it goes.
Which is something that you have to deal with, that type of response, if you're going to be on the side of the round winner, which I always am. And it's just Volkov, again, he's not going to have to worry about takedowns here. He's a lot bigger than Rozenstruik. He's got a reach advantage. His metrics are very good. 4.83 significant strikes landed per minute, 3.04 absorbed. He landed 115 strikes against Ciryl Gane in 25 minutes. Rozenstruik could knock him out. Betting Rozenstruik at plus 130, I just don't think is. If I was betting Rozenstruik, I'd be betting Rozenstruik by knockout, because I don't see the only success he has comes in rounds where he knocks you down. So unless he's horribly damaging Volkov 3 out of 5 rounds, but Volkov happens to survive, that's the only way I see him winning a decision. That doesn't sit right with me. And I don't think we're going to see a Francis Ngannou type performance either. So I would much rather, and I don't like Rozenstruik here, but if you do, I feel like the plus 185 TKO is a better number. I can get behind that equity, that finish equity, more than I can get behind 40 to 50% implied win percentage plus an edge on the book. So I just think Volkov has a clear path to winning rounds here with his volume, with his just consistency round to round. And Volkov could win by knockout too. I don't think people are talking about that outcome enough, because he's not a one-punch knockout fighter usually, but he does get finishes with attrition, with volume. And Rozenstruik's been knocked out cold before. Yeah, it was by Francis Ngannou, but if Volkov is having success early, I wouldn't be stunned if it turned into a knockout. I think betting Volkov by decision is fine. I know a lot of people are on that as well. That's probably the most likely outcome, but he has some knockout equity himself too. So I definitely favor Volkov here. We pretty much know how the fight's going to look. We pretty much know what the potential outcomes here. And unfortunately, in the heavyweight division, it's like you can't be too surprised either way. Like, even if I'm planting my flag on Volkov, he gets KO'd. You know, it's heavyweight, and it's a very high variance sport and a very high variance division. But I think it's a good line on Volkov, and I think there's some recency bias in play to the point that, yeah, I'm gonna take a shot.
You know, Brett, that's something that I hadn't actually considered, was the recency bias angle of it. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a big factor, something I generally try to point out and target. So I think that's a great thing that you mentioned there. And you might be right. The fact that Volkov has come up short against a couple of top guys, and the fact that he's coming off of a loss, this fight's going to look nothing like the Aspinall fight, obviously. But I think that you might be right. There might be some built-in bias against the guy who just took the L. It's tough. I have not bet this fight. It was kind of a lean towards Jairzinho. And honestly, Brett, after talking to you, you're making me believe in my boy Volkov, because I'm always predisposed to liking Alexander Volkov as someone who's been underrated basically his entire career. So, yeah, I mean, I might end up flipping a little bit on this one here in the main event. So.
And hey, you can always whatever your decision comes to, you can you put a couple lineups on DraftKings. You get a low price Rozenstruik. He does go out there, wins by KO. At least you got a couple lineups in the bank. That's probably, if I was going to hedge, that's the way I would do it. But I'm looking forward to this one. I really am. I've had a lot of success with Volkov just because of his style, his consistency. I think he's a very, very good fighter, and this should be a fun one.
Agreed. This one should be a good one. Brett, this whole card should be good. Like we talked about right off the top of it, man, this is some solid matchmaking. Like I mentioned before, there's a couple car crashes on this card. There's a couple of low-level fights, and usually those end up with somebody going to sleep one way or another. This one's going to be entertaining, I think. A good welcome back by the UFC. So thank you all for joining us today. That is UFC Vegas 56 from a betting breakdown here. One more time, my guy Brett Apley joining us here on Pub Sports Radio. Thank you, my friend. We really appreciate you coming on, taking your time. We went 2.5 hours today, guys, which I already usually do a long show, but 30 minutes over the usual 2-hour mark. Brett, you're a trooper. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, man. The floor is yours. Tell the people where they can find your content, what you got going on. Couldn't be more grateful, man. This was a blast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I should have warned you beforehand, because I can just talk endlessly. So, and I know you're probably built the same way, having to do, content every week. So I'm not surprised we went too long here, but I hope you guys enjoyed. It was really it was a pleasure talking with you today. Felt like we covered all the fights very well. And yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter at Brett Apley, @TPP. We got free content out there here. Obviously, Mayo Media Network, dailyfanmma.com is my site where I'll do all the DraftKings content breakdowns. We're coming up on like $2 million in subscriber winning. So pretty sweet, if I do say so myself. If you want to just learn a little bit more about DraftKings and strategies, we have projections, podcast ownership, all that good stuff. But Clint, really appreciate you having me on. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. And thanks, man. Best of luck this week. Hope it's a good card for you.
Hey, good luck right back to you, man. We will definitely do this again. This was an absolute blast. Again, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. That is this week's Die Hard MMA podcast. Of course, we'll be back on our normal schedule Thursday with the Total Takedown, where we go over the fight card again from a totals perspective, the Friday Undefeated post-weigh-in show. So keep your eyes peeled here for that. And, of course, round the clock sports betting by the other content creators here. So stay right here on Pub Sports Radio. Guys, the one thing I want to leave you with on this Memorial Day weekend, just remember what we've got right now in the entire world. I was going to say in our country, but I know there's everyone tuning in from pretty much all corners of the world for this show. The norm right now is combating hate with hate. So when people, especially online, when people want to stick that hot needle into your side and they want to come at you with venom, try to be the bigger person, try to brush it off, come back at them with kindness, don't steer right back into it, because all that does is fuel the problem. If we start showing people a more caring, affectionate side, you build that positive circle around you of good people, and that's really what you want. You start becoming the people that are near to you. So if someone comes after you, they throw some shade at you, the best thing that you can do is smile. Beat them with happiness. Know that you're living your best life, and that's the best kind of revenge you can ever get on those people that are filled with hate that way. And a lot of those people that are filled with hate are just hurt people, like a lot of us that are down on their luck, that are having a tough time looking for an outlet for that anger. We can reach them. We can turn them into positive people too. Everybody go out there, have a wonderful week. Thank you so much again. And as always, let's roll.